Chapter 2775. Uproar in the Huangji clan, however. The moment his right hand reached into the blood mist, he felt an ominous premonition in his mind. Then, a blade light swept out from the blood mist and slashed on Huang Wuqi's palm. Huang Wuqi was caught off guard and his right hand was directly cut off. However, Huang Wuqi reacted quickly and dodged in time. Otherwise, the blade light would not have just cut off his hand, but his entire body. Huang Wuqi quickly treated the wound on his right arm and found that the speed of regenerating his severed arm was extremely slow. He knew that the blade light just now was not simple. Huang Wuqi quickly retreated and stared at the blood mist. At this moment, the blood mist quickly shrank and immediately squirmed, recondensing into a body. This body was none other than Zhuowen. Zhuowen opened his eyes and quickly took out a white robe and put it on. He used his right hand as a blade and quickly slashed out several times. Each blade light was extremely sharp. Zhuowen was using the sky-splitting blade. After his Pangu's sacred body was promoted to 4-star, the power of the Panga flag's profound meaning had also increased to another level. The current sky-splitting blade was no longer what it used to be. Huang Wuqi's remaining left arm formed a fist and fiercely punched out, bursting out a terrifying fist mark. He had used the eternal fist scripture again. Huang Wuqi shattered several blade lights, and when he was about to receive the last blade light, he let out a blood-curdling scream as his left arm was chopped off. Retreat! Huang Wuqi was covered in cold sweat and immediately retreated. At the same time, he cursed in his heart. Zhuowen was so insidious that he had kept such a powerful move. Of course, Huang Wuqi was even more surprised that Zhuowen had been blasted into a blood mist by his fist mark. How did he reconstruct his body in an instant? Even for him, if his physical body was blasted into a bloody mist and his spirit was not destroyed, it would take him at least several hours to reconstruct his physical body. As for reconstructing his physical body in an instant, he had never heard of such a thing. However, Zhuowen was not surprised. His Panga's sacred body was integrated with the Gomang parasite. Not only did the Gomang parasite upgrade his Pangu's sacred body, but it also gave him an extremely powerful self-healing ability. The self-healing ability was extremely powerful. Even if his soul was destroyed, as long as there was a trace of it, Zhuowen could still rely on the self-healing ability of the Gomang parasite. If he wanted to kill Zhuowen, the only way to destroy Zhuowen's way was to the point that he could not kill translation. Otherwise, Zhuowen was like a cockroach that could not be killed. Zhuowen's eyes were cold. The moment Huang Wuqi retreated, he immediately used his ultimacy, Hongmeng Everlasting. Hongmeng Wuji instantly evolved a powerful restrictive force. Under the effect of Hongmeng Wuji, the retreating Huang Wuji paused for a moment. During this momentary pause, Zhuowen was like a fish swimming against the current, instantly slashing out more than 10 sky-splitting blades. So many sky-splitting blades shrouded Huang Wuqi, and even though the latter was constantly struggling, he was still able to take out a useful divine artifact from his spirit ring. But under the chi-splitting blades, all of them were destroyed like paper. When Huang Wuqi was at the end of his rope, he could only watch in despair as more than a dozen chi-splitting blades entered his body and tore him into countless pieces. Puchi! The moment he killed Huang Wuqi, Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was pale. Using more than a dozen chi-splitting blades at once was beyond what Zhuowen could bear. At this moment, he suffered the backlash of the profound and became extremely weak. Fortunately, he killed Huang Wuji in the end and got rid of this future trouble. The surroundings were terrifyingly quiet. Everyone stared at the scene in a daze. They were sluggish and had yet to recover from Huang Wuqi's death. Get lost! Zhuowen looked at the group of onlookers and said this one word. Suddenly, the people around him scattered like monkeys when the tree fell, and they all disappeared. The strongest hall masters of the Huangji aristocratic family had been killed, and even Huang Wuqi had died. Now, the The first head and second head of the Huangji aristocratic family were not in the Huangji aristocratic family, and the third head, Huanglin, had left for a period of time. Now, in the Huangji family, who could be the opponent of this white-clothed demon? The restriction on the surface of the Huangji family's inner city is quite stubborn. It will take me some time to break it. Fortunately, Huanglin is not in the Huangji family. Otherwise, I would have to use Ho Yi's divine arrow. Zhuowen looked at his true body, who was still breaking the restriction not far away. His eyes flickered as he muttered to himself. When he made such a big movement, only Huang Wuqi appeared. Huang Lin did not show up at all. He knew that Huang Lin should not be in the Huangji family. As for where exactly Huang Lin had gone, Zhuowen had no idea. Let's go to the treasury. Zhuowen looked at his true body, who was still breaking the restriction. After hesitating for a moment, he put his true body away and entered the depths of the Huangji family. Previously, when his spirit came out of the sun-moon demonic mirror, he knew that the place where the sun-moon demonic mirror was placed was a treasury. He guessed that it should be a very important treasury of the Huangji family. Since Huang Wuqi was killed by him and Huang Lin was not in the Huangji family, Zhuowen set his sights on the treasury. Ho Yi's divine arrow was a glutton. The resources needed to shoot an arrow were too terrifying. Moreover, the more energy there was, the more powerful the Ho Yi's divine arrow would be. Now he was lacking resources. After all, the Huangji family was a Dao Mansion level force. There must be a lot of resources inside. Moreover, the three masters were not here. How could he let go of such an opportunity to plunder? Following his memory, Zhuowen arrived in front of the treasury. Zhuowen had studied the structure of the treasury before he left. Zhuowen only took 15 minutes to break the door of the treasury. When he opened the door of the treasury, he unceremoniously put everything he saw inside into the macro world. It had to be said that the Huangji family was worthy of being a Dao Mansion level force. The resources inside were enormous. Even Zhuowen, who was used to seeing such things, was surprised. Zhuowen spent several hours plundering. When he finished plundering the treasury, he suddenly punched out and destroyed the entire treasury. The treasury was located at the top of the Huangji family's inner city palace. When he destroyed the treasury, a big hole was broken in the top of the palace, which alarmed many disciples of the Huangji family. Many disciples were unable to restrain their anger. However, when they saw that the initiator was Zhuowen, all of them were dejected like withered grass. They did not dare to step forward to stop Zhuowen. This palace doesn't need to exist anymore. Zhuowen rushed out of the palace and looked down at the huge palace in front of him. This was the symbolic building of the Huangji family. Today, Zhuowen had completely fallen out with the Huangji family. Therefore, he would not be polite. He would also destroy the palace and teach the Huangji family a lesson. Thinking of this, Zhuowen summoned the Thunder Fire Sword, Blood Immortal Sword, and Death Sacrifice Sword. He ordered them to tear down the huge palace. Meanwhile, he began to silently continue to break the restriction of the inner city. Boom! Chapter 2776. Lei Litian Thunder God Garden, a powerful force nurtured in the endless Thunder territory, was well known in the host territory. Thunder God Garden was also a Dao Palace level force, but it could be said to be one of the strongest among the Dao Palaces, ranking even higher than the Huangji family. At this moment, in the core of the Lightning God's Garden, the Lightning God's Garden Master, Lei Litian, was sitting on the seat of honor in the main hall. His right hand was tapping on the right armrest, and an imposing aura was emitted from his body. Sitting in the seats below the hall were two men whose auras were no weaker than Lei Litian's. Of these two men, one was a bald man with a smile on his face, while the other was a middle-aged man with a potbelly. If Zhuowen were here, he would recognize these two men at a glance. They were none other than the Huangji family's first master, Huang Wu, and second master, Huang Shan. Brother Huang Wu, you came to my Thunder God Garden from afar just to ask for 2 people. The stiff atmosphere in the hall only lasted for a moment before Lei Litian finally spoke. Huang Wu smiled and cupped his fists towards Lei Litian. Garden Master Lei, I have already explained the whole story clearly. My 3 sons died in the 8 heavens, and Fire Plume and Steel Plume of Purple Red House seem to be witnesses. The Purple Red House is a vassal force of the Thunder God Garden. That's why I came all the way here to pay you a visit. I hope that the Thunder God Garden Lord can give me some face and allow me to bring these 2 people back to the Huangji clan for investigation. Lei Litian snorted coldly, still tapping on the armrest, but he remained indifferent and did not answer. Huang Wu did not feel embarrassed at all, still smiling as he took out a very delicate brocade box from his spirit ring and handed it to Lei Litian. Lei Litian raised his brow and took the small brocade box calmly. After checking it casually, a dignified look appeared in his eyes. Brother Huang Wu, you're really generous. You're actually willing to give out eternal pills for 2 people. You're quite bold, Lei Litian said with interest. Huang Wu smiled slightly but did not speak. He knew that the moment he took out the eternal pill, Lei Litian would definitely agree to take away Fire Plume and Steel Plume. The eternal pill was similar to the destiny pill. It could help Lord profound secrets cultivate and increase his chances of becoming an eternal lord. Moreover, if an eternal overlord used an eternal pill to cultivate, it would be more effective than using a heavenly Tao origin crystal. It could be said that eternal pills were extremely precious. Even for a Tao prefect-level force like the Huangji clan, although they had a lot of eternal pills, it definitely wasn't a lot. Seeing Huang Wu take out an eternal pill, Lei Litian felt very satisfied in his heart. As for Fire Plume and Steel Plume, they were nothing more than ants in Lei Litian's eyes. Exchanging the lives of 2 ants for these eternal pills, in Lei Litian's opinion, was completely worth it. In fact, it even exceeded his expectations. Master Lei, you won't stop us from heading to the Purple Red House now, right? Huang Wu asked with a smile. Lei Litian nodded slightly and said, After all, the Purple Red House is a vassal force of my Lightning God's Garden. As long as you don't go too far, I won't interfere. Huang Wu smiled. This was exactly what he wanted. With his and Huang Shan's strength, entering the Purple Red House and capturing them would be a piece of cake. He was mainly afraid that Lei Litian would obstruct them. Now that he had dealt with Lei Litian, taking down Fire Plume and Steel Plume was naturally in the bag. But soon, Huang Wu's expression changed. Big brother, what's wrong? Huang Shan noticed Huang Wu's expression and asked in surprise. Huang Wu's face was gloomy as he said, The soul I left in Xing, his body disappeared. Huang Shan's pupils shrank. He had long known that Huang Wu had left a soul in the galaxy of stars. This primordial spirit was left in Huang Xinghe's soul. In other words, if Huang Xinghe's soul was destroyed, Huang Wu would immediately know. Who is so bold? Who dares to kill Xinghe? Huang Shan's gaze became unfriendly. Huang Wu took a deep breath and said coldly, No matter who it is, we have to rush back now. Huang Shan was stunned and said hesitantly, Big brother, aren't we going to the Purple Red House? After all, the purpose of our trip is to take away the Fire Plume and Steel Plume. Huang Wu said, There's no hurry. Then Huang Wu cupped his hands at Lei Litian and said, Master Lei, there's a situation in the Huangji family. We might have to make a trip back first and take the 2 away later. I'm sure Master Lei will agree. No problem. Brother Huang Wu, you can come at any time. My Lightning God's Garden welcomes you, Lei Litian said with a fake smile. Huang Wu cupped his hands and hurriedly left with Huang Shan. Lei Litian silently looked at Huang Wu and Huang Shan's backs as they left. His eyes flickered with interest. Go and investigate what happened in the Huangji family. After you're done, come back and report to me. Lei Litian flicked his finger and a bolt of lightning shot out from his fingertip. On the stone sculpture behind him, a man slowly appeared amidst the flickering lightning. That person knelt on one knee on the ground, bowed respectfully, and then disappeared on the spot. After Zhuowen destroyed the Huangji family's core palace and the array formation, he directly left the inner city. The outer city of the Huangji family was very big, but it was very chaotic now. Zhuowen's destruction of the Huangji family's core palace had caused a huge uproar. Everyone was in chaos. Zhuowen ignored the chaotic scene. The direction he was heading towards was the Huangji family's teleportation array. The distance between the Lightning God's Garden and the Huangji family was very far. With the speed of Zhuowen's space-time roulette, it would take him several years to reach there. Therefore, if he wanted to reach the Lightning God's Garden in a short period of time, Zhuowen could only rely on the Huangji family's teleportation array. The Huangji family's main teleportation array was built in the outer city. When Zhuowen arrived at the location of the teleportation array, the cultivators of the Huangji family guarding the teleportation array did not say a word and attacked Zhuowen. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's current strength was too terrifying. Although there were many cultivators, the strongest was only the Master of Destiny. They could not even withstand a single move from Zhuowen and were all destroyed by Zhuowen. Landing in the huge teleportation array, Zhuowen immediately used the primordial everlasting and took out a considerable amount of heavenly law origin crystals. He placed them on the teleportation array and immediately activated it. However, Zhuowen's eyes quickly darkened, because when he activated the teleportation array, he discovered that there was a teleportation fluctuation coming from the teleportation array. Chapter 2777. Killing Huanglin not good. Someone is coming from the other side of the teleportation array. Zhuowen immediately put away the heavenly Tao origin crystal at the edge of the teleportation array. Instead, he threw a punch at the array base in an attempt to destroy the teleportation array. Zhuowen wasn't a fool. Back then, he had searched Huangju's memories and knew that Huang Wu and Huang Shan had both gone to the Lightning God's Garden. The two of them had been gone for quite some time. Now that the teleportation array of the Huangji family had once again fluctuated, he knew that it was very likely that the two of them had returned. He recalled that there was a trace of primordial spirit left behind by Huang Wu in the galaxy of stars. He knew that the moment he killed the galaxy of stars, Huang Wu must have known that the galaxy of stars had fallen. However, he didn't expect that Huang Wu would immediately return not long after he killed the galaxy of stars. It seemed that he had underestimated the position of the galaxy of stars in Huang Wu's heart. It was precisely because he guessed that it might be Huang Wu that Zhuowen had decisively destroyed the array base. Huang Wu was simply too powerful. After all, he was a creator and was already a third-step almighty. Facing such an expert, Zhuowen really didn't have the confidence to fight against him. "Who is it? How dare you destroy the teleportation array of my Huangji family? You're simply courting death." The moment Zhuowen attacked the array base, a whirlpool appeared in the teleportation array. Immediately after, a palm swept out and blasted towards Zhuowen's chest. The palm's power was terrifying, but it wasn't fast. The angle was also very tricky. It just happened to block the array base. In other words, Zhuowen could easily avoid the palm, but at the same time he would lose the opportunity to destroy the array base. A trace of ruthlessness flashed in Zhuowen's eyes. He ignored the palm that was blasting towards him and didn't dodge. Instead, he punched the array base. Crack! The array base directly shattered, and Zhuowen's chest was also hit by the palm. Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. Clouds of blood continuously burst out of his body. Within the clouds of blood, Zhuowen's body seemed like it would collapse at any moment. However, Zhuowen's self-healing ability was too strong. Every time his body collapsed, the vitality of the Gomeng goo worm would pour into his body and restore his body. Zhuowen repeated this process of collapse and recovery more than a dozen times, and endured this kind of torment and pain more than a dozen times. When the collapse finally passed, Zhuan barely managed to stand up and watch the palm disappear into the teleportation array. Of the array base was destroyed, the teleportation array base was destroyed. Of the people on world, the teleportation array Meng Li was the teleportation. What terrifying power is God? Is this the realm creators? Zhua, when shuddered with fear, his eyes filled with shock. At this moment, his body was extremely weak. He had already suffered severe internal injuries. If not for the Gomang Gu worm's powerful self-healing ability, that palm would have been enough to kill him. It's too difficult for me to fight against a god creator now. Moreover, Huang Wu is only in the early stage of the god creator realm. If he were in the middle or later stages, wouldn't he be even more terrifying? Zhuowen muttered to himself. The shock in his eyes could not be concealed. It seems like it's impossible to use the teleportation array to go to Lightning God's Garden. I can only fly there myself. Zhuowen shook his head and sighed. He took out the space-time roulette and left the Huangji clan. Not long after Zhuowen left, a ray of light flew over from afar and landed on top of the Huangji clan's core palace. Who did this? Who dares to do such a thing in my Huangji clan? The person roared furiously when he saw the ruins below. Lord Huanglin, it was Zhuowen who did it. He even killed the eldest prince, the fifth prince, and dozens of hall masters. Then he left just like that. Someone immediately tried to curry favor with the person below. This person was the third head of the Huangji clan, Huanglin. He had some trivial matters to attend to and had left the Huangji clan to deal with them. However, he didn't expect that when he returned he would see the Huangji clan in such a state. Moreover, Huang Wuqi and other important figures had been slaughtered. Zhuowen has awakened, and he dares to do such a thing. Tell me, where did Zhuowen go? Huang Lin's eyes were red as he asked the people below. Third head, I know. Zhuowen went in that direction. Someone pointed in the direction where Zhuowen left and said angrily. Huang Lin coldly snorted. With a stomach full of anger, he rushed in the direction that Zhuowen had left in. However, as soon as Huang Lin rushed out of the Huangji clan, an unprecedented and terrifying killing intent immediately locked onto him. Huang Lin's body immediately stiffened. His pupils constricted, and he could not help but look at the mountains in front of the Huangji clan. The killing intent was really coming from the mountains. In Huang Lin's eyes, a young man in white was standing quietly in a remote valley among the mountains. A strange, blood-stained horn was floating in front of the young man in white. This terrifying killing intent was emitted from the blood-stained horn. Zhuowen, Huang Lin bellowed. A terrifying aura burst out from his frozen body, and he dashed towards the mountains like an arrow leaving the bow. Although Huang Lin's aura was extremely terrifying, there was still a big gap between it and the killing intent from Hou Yi's divine arrow beside Zhuowen. Moreover, the effect of the killing intent was extremely faint. All the cultivators in the Huangji clan prostrated themselves on the ground and did not dare to get up. They were so frightened by the killing intent that they did not dare to face it and could only submit. Zhuowen looked at Huang Lin, who was flying towards him silently. His gaze was extremely calm. After searching Huang Zhu's memory, he knew that Huang Lin had only gone out for a while and would definitely be back soon. After he left the Huangji clan, he did not leave immediately. Instead, he hid in the mountains to wait for Huang Lin's appearance. With Zhuowen's current strength, although he might not be a match for Huang Lin, it would be difficult for Huang Lin to kill him. In addition, Zhuowen still had a powerful weapon like Hou Yi's divine arrow. Therefore, he made up his mind to kill Huang Lin here. Huang Lin had indeed returned as he wished. Under the reminder of those people, he was going to kill Zhuowen. Although Huang Lin had a strong aura, he was terrified. Ever since he saw the scene restored by the Sun-Moon Demon Mirror, he knew how terrifying the blood-stained horn in Zhuowen's hand was. However, he also knew that he could not retreat. Once he retreated, he would definitely be looked down upon by everyone in the Huangji clan. Moreover, his reputation would suffer a disastrous decline. Seeing Huang Lin shooting over like a raging dragon, Zhou revealed a cold smile at the corner of his mouth. He was most afraid that Huang Lin would run away. If Huang Lin really wanted to run away, Zhou might not be able to lock onto him completely. However, Huang Lin did not run away. He knew that Huang Lin was doomed. Chapter 2778. Huang Lin fell. The killing intent became more and more terrifying, as if it had materialized. The surrounding mountains were also shaken by this killing intent to the point of trembling, as if they would collapse at any moment. The countless cultivators of the Huangji clan all bent down and shivered. They could only barely raise their heads and look at the scene of Huang Lin flashing towards the mountains. They only had one thought in their minds, and that was for Huang Lin to quickly kill Zhou and stop this terrifying killing intent from spreading. Die. Huang Lin was very fast. He rushed in front of Zhou and attacked with his palm. Huang Lin didn't hold back at all. The power of a half-step Genesis Overlord poured out and hit Zhou. Zhou retreated. In a situation where he couldn't dodge, he could only fight Huang Lin head-on. One had to admit that Huang Lin was indeed more powerful than Zhou. Zhou's fist was immediately torn apart. However, Zhou continued to retreat because of this and continued to shoot Hou Yi's godly arrow. His shredded fist instantly recovered, but blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth uncontrollably. Huang Lin's attack from the teleportation formation had already injured Zhou. Now, Zhou was completely holding on. As long as he could shoot Hou Yi's godly arrow, Huang Lin would be dead for sure. Huang Lin knew this as well. Hence, he attacked like a madman. Every move was a killing move. Zhou didn't really fight Huang Lin head-on. Instead, he relied on the esoteric creation, Mysterious Light, to deal with Huang Lin. Although his injuries were getting worse, Zhou relied on his powerful self-healing ability to barely hold on. On the other hand, Huang Lin was sweating more and more. After attacking for a long time, the killing intent released by the blood-stained horn was getting more and more terrifying. I must kill this guy, otherwise I'll be in danger. Huang Lin gritted his teeth and punched out. Fist imprints appeared in midair. These fist prints gathered together to form a galaxy, a vortex that turned into an incomparably huge fist print domain. This huge domain descended from the sky like a boundless mountain, directly submerging Zhou's figure. Zhou kept retreating as he looked at the terrifying fist imprint domain. He was not unfamiliar with this move. It was the Eternal Fist scripture that Huang Wuqi had used before. However, the Eternal Fist scripture that Huang Lin used was much more terrifying than Huang Wuji's. I can't take it head-on. This was the only thought in Zhou Wen's mind at the moment. He looked at the Hou Yi divine arrow in his hand that was brimming with killing intent. He knew that if he didn't shoot this arrow now, he would really be in great danger. Phew! It's finally going to end. This Zhou is really arrogant. He killed the heir of our Huangji family, killed dozens of hall masters, and even destroyed the core palace. This guy is still hiding, planning to kill the third head. I have to say, this child does indeed have a lot of trump cards. However, the fact that he tried to kill the third head was the worst decision he ever made. Now that he has fallen, he deserves it. In the Huangji family, many cultivators watched as the terrifying fist imprint domain completely submerged Zhou's figure, as if they were liberated. They all thought that Zhou would definitely die. Boom! However, to everyone's surprise, a deafening explosion suddenly resounded. Immediately after, the fist imprint domain that stretched across the sky exploded like fireworks. In the dazzling brilliance, a bloody light flashed past quickly and headed straight for Huang Lin, who was not far away. Huang Lin's pupils constricted as he felt an unprecedented sense of danger. He immediately retreated and took out all the divine weapons that he could use. However, every time he took out a divine weapon in front of him, it was smashed into pieces by the bloody light and shattered into countless pieces. In the end, all of Huang Lin's trump cards were torn apart by the Ho-E divine arrow. In the end, he could only use his hands to block it. He used the eternal fist scripture and unleashed his strongest punch. Countless fist imprints surrounded his body like a Buddha descending to the world, constantly rotating. When he punched out, the sun and the moon rose and fell. White light filled the sky, and the entire world seemed to have become chaotic again. However, the white light only lasted for 15 minutes before it was filled with bloody light. Immediately after, the entire sky was dyed red, as if the sky was injured and bleeding. It was a terrifying sight. A sharp, bloody light shot out and entered Huang Lin's body from the front and came out from behind him, bringing along a bloody mist that filled the sky. Huang Lin spat out a mouthful of blood and looked at his chest in disbelief. At that moment, there was a bloody hole in his chest. Moreover, countless bloody lines began to spread out from the bloody hole and covered his entire body. Then, Huang Lin let out a blood-curdling scream. His entire body was shattered into countless pieces like a porcelain doll. Zhuowen coughed out a mouthful of blood and rushed out with difficulty. After putting away the Ho-E divine arrow, he used the space-time roulette and disappeared from the place. His injuries were too serious, and he was very weak now. Even the heavenly Tao Master could kill him at this moment. He had to leave and find a secluded place to cultivate in seclusion. After Zhuowen left, the entire Huangji clan was stunned. The atmosphere was so silent that not a single sound could be heard. However, after a short moment of silence, the surroundings immediately burst into an uproar. Extremely ear-piercing noises, discussions, and disbelief erupted. No one had expected that Zhuowen would be able to kill their third head, Huang Lin. It was too terrifying. Huang Lin was one of the 3 pillars of the Huangji clan. Now that he was dead, the Huangji clan's loss was too great. Everyone knew that after this incident, the Huangji clan and Zhuowen would be irreconcilable. They would fight to the death. In front of the huge teleportation array in the Lightning God's garden, Huang Wu and Huang Shan faintly felt a sense of loss. At the same time, there was a trace of palpitations and pain. Third head, he is dead? Huang Wu took out an exquisite jade pendant. At that moment, the jade pendant was already filled with cracks. This jade pendant had Huang Lin's life imprint. It had always been on Huang Wu's body. Not only Huang Lin's, Huang Shan's life jade pendant was also on Huang Wu's body. As long as anything happened to either of them, Huang Wu would immediately know. Now that Huang Lin's life imprint had disappeared, Huang Wu knew that Huang Lin was dead. Who is it? Who dares to cause trouble in my Huangji clan? If I catch him, I'll make sure he dies without a burial ground. Huang Wu's eyes were overflowing with hatred. However, he quickly calmed down. He looked at Huang Shan and said, "Second brother, the Huangji clan's teleportation array has been destroyed. We can only teleport to the nearest force. We have to return immediately." Huang Shan naturally had no objections. However, he was a little hesitant as he said, "Big brother, could it be that Zhuowen who caused trouble in the Huangji clan? No matter what, we have to return first. As for that Zhuowen, I'll spare no effort to kill him. I won't hesitate, even if I have to contact the infamous blood prison," Huang Wu said coldly. Huang Shan's eyes narrowed. The blood prison was the largest assassin organization in the host region. Many forces trembled in fear upon hearing their name. Moreover, the blood prison was very mysterious. No one knew where the blood prison was located. Moreover, most people didn't know what level of force the blood prison was. Chapter 2779. Merciless betrayal after leaving the Huangji family's sphere of influence. Zhuowen immediately found a cave. After quickly setting up a simple formation at the entrance of the cave, he only had time to summon the Thunder Fire Sword. Then he closed his eyes and lost consciousness. Zhuowen's injuries were extremely severe. Apart from that, his mind was also extremely exhausted. Thus, the moment he found the cave, he immediately fell asleep. Zhuowen slept for a whole month. When he woke up, he found that his injuries were basically healed. The Gomonggu worm is really too powerful. Zhuowen stood up with an excited gaze. Before he fell unconscious, his injuries were extremely severe. If he wanted to recover, he would have to pay a huge price. However, he only slept for half a month and completely recovered. This showed how much the Gomonggu worm had given him. Zhuowen knew that the Gomonggu worm he obtained this time was really a huge gain for him. "Kid, you're finally awake." After Zhuowen woke up, Xiaohei, who had been guarding him, slowly walked to him. "Yes, Xiaohei. When I was unconscious, did anything big happen in the outside world?" Zhuowen asked. He knew that Xiaohei was not a stable person. When he was unconscious, Xiaohei definitely went out. He guessed it from the formation restriction at the entrance of the cave. Xiaohei smiled awkwardly. However, she quickly became serious and said, "If we're talking about big things, they're all related to you. Kid, you're really famous now. The entire host region is talking about your name. Annihilated dozens of hall masters of the Huangji aristocratic family and killed almost all of the heirs of the Huangji aristocratic family. Even annihilated the third head of the Huangji aristocratic family, Huanglin, destroyed the core palace of the Huangji aristocratic family, and robbed their treasury. You're too awesome. In the host region, everyone knows your name. Many people are even looking for you." Zhuowen was stunned, and then he smiled bitterly. Actually, he knew that he might cause a huge uproar after he caused such a ruckus in the Huangji family. However, he never expected that the influence he caused would spread throughout the host region. This was a little too exaggerated. "Many people are looking for me. Is it because the Ho-E divine arrow in my possession has been exposed?" Zhuowen thought of something and suddenly looked at Xiaohei and asked in a deep voice. Xiaohei nodded and said, "No, it's just that Huang Wu offered a very generous reward. Huang Wu returned to the Huang Ji family half a month ago and saw the miserable state of the Huang Ji family and flew into a rage and issued an arrest warrant. As for the Ho-E godly arrow, Huang Wu knows that it's not an ordinary item. He definitely won't reveal it. Otherwise, he won't be able to keep it to himself." Zhuowen was relieved when he heard this. What he feared the most was that Ho-Yi's divine arrow would be exposed. This thing was the treasure of the great shaman Ho-Yi. It was once dyed in the blood of the golden crow and was extremely powerful. If the Ho-Yi divine arrow was exposed, it would probably cause huge trouble. "Looks like I've aged a lot in the past month." Zhuowen rubbed his chin and noticed that a thick beard had grown on his chin. Zhuowen didn't shave off the beard on his chin. Instead, he changed the corners of his face slightly. In this way, his appearance would be different from before, and it would be difficult for people to recognize him as Zhuowen at first glance. "Kid, do you plan to go to the Lightning God's Garden next?" Xiaohei asked. "Yes, I have to go to the Purple Red House under the Lightning God's Garden to see Qimei. I suspect that Huang Wu went to the Lightning God's Garden for the Fire Plume and Steel Plume. I have to inform them in advance," Zhuowen said in a slightly worried tone. Xiaohei didn't say anything. He basically followed Zhuowen's lead now. After he removed the restrictions on the cave entrance and confirmed that there was no danger in the surroundings, he took out the space-time roulette and flew towards the Lightning God's Garden. Baihong Hall was the strongest force in the host region below the Dao sects. Its foundation was actually not much different from an ordinary Dao sect. At this moment, Baihong Hall's huge mountain gate was terrifyingly quiet. A strong smell of blood permeated the air from the depths of the mountain gate. Thud, 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 thud. A man covered in blood walked out from the depths of the mountain gate. He looked as if he had crawled out from hell. This man was extremely handsome. There was a vertical scar between his eyebrows, as if it was a third eye. Haha, not bad. Sakyamuni, you're really a talent. You're ruthless and unscrupulous. This kind of character suits the philosophy of our 10 Extremes in Corpse sect very well. A gloomy voice came from above. Shortly after, a black coffin fell from the sky and landed in front of Sakyamuni. The coffin opened, and a skinny old man walked out. This old man was dressed in black. Among his withered facial features, there was a pair of frighteningly large eyes. If he looked at you, it would be as if you were being stared at by a malicious spirit in the night. It would make your hair stand on end. Sakyamuni just glanced indifferently at the skinny old man and said without batting an eyelid, "I'm already someone without a sect now, so I have the qualifications to join your 10 Extremes Corp sect, right?" The skinny old man chuckled and said, "You possess a heaven-grade ancestral Tao root, so you're already a rare genius. How could you possibly not have the qualifications to join my 10 Extremes Corp sect? However, don't be conceited. You aren't the only one in my 10 Extremes Corp sect that possesses a heaven-grade ancestral Tao root." Sakyamuni's gaze was calm while he placed his hands behind his back, and he seemed as if he didn't care about the old man's words at all. Or perhaps he seemed to not take those geniuses with heaven-grade ancestral Tao roots that the skinny old man spoke of seriously. He did have such arrogance, not to mention that he possessed the natural talent of being reborn from a single drop of blood. Just the fact that his ancestral Tao root could evolve incessantly made him feel no need to take those geniuses seriously. When he was recruited into the White Rainbow Hall by Sun Chi, his ancestral Tao root was merely an Earth-grade ancestral Tao root. But after he entered the White Rainbow Hall, his cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds, and he defeated all his opponents to step foot into the second step of the Tao validation realm and advance into the heavenly mandate realm. On the other hand, he unintentionally noticed that his ancestral Tao root had actually evolved, and his cultivation speed had become even swifter. After he found out that his ancestral Tao root could evolve, he knew exactly how enormous his potential was. In the future, along with the ceaseless improvement of his cultivation, his ancestral Tao root would continue to evolve. At that time, it wouldn't be impossible for his ancestral Tao root to surpass the heaven grade. It was precisely because he knew about his ability that Sakyamuni had absolute confidence in himself. Even if it was those monstrous geniuses from Tao Palace level powers, he actually didn't take them seriously. At the same time, he couldn't help but recall Zhuowen, who'd almost killed him all those years ago, and his eyes narrowed before he quickly tossed it to the back of his mind. He was clearly aware that his future was limitless. Even though Zhuowen's strength was formidable, the gap between them would only grow wider and wider. Presently, he'd just arrived at the Xianmi heavenly region for a few years, yet he'd already advanced into the heavenly mandate realm. On the other hand, Zhuowen was at most a heaven Tao, Lord now. Chapter 2780. Thunder, God, Garden Sakyamuni shook his head and laughed. He felt that it was a joke to think of Zhuowen. Right now, he was no longer on the same level as Zhuowen. He didn't even have the thought of specifically looking for Zhuowen for revenge, because he didn't need to care about clowns anymore. When the skinny old man saw Sakyamuni's nonchalant expression, he knew that the latter was overconfident to the point of conceit. This made him a little unhappy. "Sakyamuni, no matter how strong you are, there will always be someone stronger. I recently heard that a cultivator who's only a Tao origin master caused a ruckus in the Huangji clan and came out unscathed." The skinny old man said indifferently. Sakyamuni raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. The Huangji clan was a relatively powerful Tao Palace faction. Its foundation was many times stronger than the Baihong Hall. If Sakyamuni had been the one to enter the Huangji clan, he wouldn't have dared to think of causing a ruckus. However, the Tao origin master the skinny old man spoke of had dared to cause a ruckus and come out unscathed. "Is that so? That person's pretty lucky to be able to escape alive," Sakyamuni said indifferently. The skinny old man laughed. "It seems that you really don't know anything. That Tao origin master didn't escape smoothly. He fought his way out of the Huangji clan. It's said that this guy killed dozens of Huangji clan hall masters by himself. All of them were second-step Tao validation experts. Among them, 5 were early-stage eternal overlords. Sakyamuni's gaze turned solemn and surprised. Not only that, but he also killed the eldest son of the Huangji clan, Huang Wuqi. He's a peak-level eternal overlord genius of the Huangji clan. It's said that he's the most promising descendant of the Huangji clan to become a Genesis overlord. Sakyamuni frowned slightly, feeling a trace of pressure. He hadn't expected such a freak to exist. He was only a Tao origin master, but he could kill a peak eternal overlord. What's even more unexpected is that he killed the third head of the Huangji family, Huanglin, shocking the entire host region. At this point, the skinny old man could not help but say regretfully, "This is a true monster." Our 10 Extremes Een Corp sect is also looking for this person, hoping to recruit such a talent. However, this person is very mysterious. Ever since the incident with the Huangji family, he disappeared from the world. Sakyamuni didn't feel good, but he wasn't discouraged. He knew his own situation, and he knew that he would only be stronger than that person in the future. What is this person's name? He is only a Tao Yuan master, yet he has such strength. He can't be a nobody, Sakyamuni asked calmly. The skinny old man glanced at Sakyamuni and said, "I heard that the man's name is Zhuowen, but I'm not sure if that's his fake name or his real name." The instant he heard the name Zhuowen, Sakyamuni jumped to his feet and looked at the skinny old man in disbelief. "You said that person's name is Zhuowen?" The skinny old man was a little surprised by Sakyamuni's reaction. "Yes, could it be that you know this person?" Sakyamuni took a deep breath. He knew that he had been too excited, and he said, "I don't know, but I know someone called Zhuowen in the past. However, he was born in the 8 heavens, so it might be a different person." The skinny old man did not think too much about it, and he only gave a curt reply. He sighed and lamented how good it was to be able to find that Zhuowen. Meanwhile, Sakyamuni was extremely unsettled, and he constantly comforted himself that Zhuowen is definitely not the same person. I don't believe that Zhuowen's strength has increased so quickly that he has the strength to kill a half-step god of creation. Time flew by, and several years passed in the blink of an eye. During these few years, Zhuowen's entire focus was on heading toward the lightning god's garden. Originally, he could enter the nearest power and use its teleportation formation to head directly to the lightning god's garden. However, every time he entered a power, he would be able to see the information and portrait of him as a wanted criminal. Although his face had become much older than before, one could still see a trace of Zhuowen's features on his face. After several attempts, Zhuowen finally decided not to take the risk. Instead, he planned to directly fly over. After all, if he was recognized, he would be surrounded and attacked by many cultivators. With his current strength, although he was not afraid of being surrounded, he was afraid that Huang Wu would immediately rush back through the teleportation formation. Once he was delayed and Huang Wu caught up to him, he would really be in deep trouble. Zhuowen did not dare to be careless within the territory of the Huangji family. After leaving the territory of the Huangji family, he planned to use the teleportation formation to directly enter the lightning god's garden. He had investigated before. The relationship between the lightning god's garden and the Huangji family was not very good. Moreover, the lightning god's garden's foundation was even stronger than the Huangji family's peak. In the territory of the lightning god's garden, the influence of the Huangji family's wanted order was much smaller. Looks like I've already left the territory of the Huangji family and entered the territory of the lightning god's garden. Zhuowen sat upright on the space-time roulette and opened the map in his hand to take a closer look. The corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a smile. The place he was currently in was the territory of one of the lightning god's garden's subordinate forces, the 7 Stars sect. This 7 Stars sect was also a Tao-level power. In the past few years, Zhuowen had carefully studied the map of the host region. He knew that the teleportation formations between the Tao-level powers were not interconnected. If he wanted to go to the corresponding Tao level power, he had to first go to the Tao mansion level power above the Tao level. Only by using the teleportation formation within the Tao mansion level power could he go to the corresponding Tao level power under the jurisdiction of the Tao mansion level power. As for the teleportation formations between the Tao mansion level power, they were interconnected. For example, Huang Wu had directly entered the lightning god's garden from the Huang Ji family's teleportation formation. After asking the cultivators who passed by, Zhuowen quickly found out the location of the teleportation formation set up by the Seven Stars sect. After paying a certain amount of heavenly law origin crystals, Zhuowen entered the teleportation formation without any obstructions. When Zhuowen opened his eyes, what entered his eyes was a densely packed palace. However, these palaces were not as dazzling as the Huang Ji families. Instead, they seemed to be made of black iron and emitted a cold aura. The only shocking thing was that the palaces here were basically surrounded by lightning. It was as if the palaces here were nurtured by endless lightning. Moreover, these lightning bolts were not ordinary lightning bolts. Zhuowen could deeply feel how terrifying these lightning bolts were. Even a cultivator in the second step of the path validation realm would probably be blasted into pieces if they were enveloped by such dense lightning bolts. Zhuowen could tell at a glance that these lightning bolts were also a very powerful restriction formation. However, other than the restriction formation, Zhuowen also sensed the aura of the origin of lightning. Chapter 2781. Meeting Tong Chimei again. This lightning god's garden is truly spectacular. Zhuowen muttered to himself as he stepped out of the transportation array, but soon his path was blocked by a figure. She was a valiant woman. She wore a long blue dress, and beneath her dress there were traces of thunder and lightning. Deep in the woman's bright eyes was a deep blue. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the blue was the color of lightning. "Miss, may I ask what business you have with me?" Zhuowen was neither servile nor overbearing as he looked at the woman in front of him. The path here was wide, but the woman deliberately blocked his path. It was obvious that she was doing it on purpose. However, Zhuowen was puzzled. He did not know this woman, so this should be the first time they met. Why would she deliberately block his path? The valiant woman sized Zhuowen up from top to bottom, and her beautiful eyes revealed a pondering expression. After that, she smiled sweetly and said, "This brother is slightly similar to a friend that an old friend of mine mentioned. So I stopped to observe carefully. I hope that brother can forgive me for disturbing you." After she finished speaking, the woman casually brushed past Zhuowen. Zhuowen was a little confused, but when he saw the guard in charge of the transportation array treating the woman with respect, he knew that her identity was not ordinary. However, Zhuowen was in a hurry to go to the Purple Red House, so he did not think too much about it. After heading to the transportation array designated by the Purple Red House, Zhuowen paid the corresponding amount of heavenly law origin crystals and disappeared into the array. When Zhuowen arrived at the area under the Purple Red House's jurisdiction, a look of surprise appeared on his face. This was because the area under the Purple Red House's jurisdiction was too deserted. There were very few people here, and the land was vast but sparsely populated. Even the mountain gate that symbolized the Purple Red House was extremely dilapidated. It did not look like a Taoist faction at all. The corners of Zhuowen's eyes twitched when he saw the state of the Purple Red House. The Purple Red House was in a state of decline. Compared to the Impermanence Palace he was in, if the Impermanence Palace was a bustling town, the Purple Red House was a poor village. Zhuowen landed in front of the Purple Red Schoolhouse's mountain gate. There was only one guard in front of the gate, and this guard was ridiculously young. His cultivation was only at the Heavenly Tao, Lord level. "Who are you?" When the guard saw Zhuowen, it was as if he was facing a great enemy. He hurriedly stood up and was slightly nervous. He could feel that Zhuowen's cultivation was higher than his. "I'm here to look for Fire Plume and Steel Plume. Please inform them." Zhuowen smiled. The guard was stunned and subconsciously asked, "Are you a friend of Senior Sister Fire Plume and Marshal Uncle Steel Plume?" "That's right." Zhuowen nodded. The young guard scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "Senior, I'm really sorry. Senior Sister Fire Plume and Marshal Uncle Steel Plume are not in the sect right now." "Where did they go?" Zhuowen asked with a frown. "They should have gone to the Lightning God's Garden. It seems that the Lightning God's Garden's great senior sister, Lei Zishuan, summoned them," the young guard said. Hearing this, Zhuowen couldn't help but think of the valiant woman he met when he first arrived at the Lightning God's Garden. "What does Lei Zishuan look like? Do you know?" Zhuowen asked. The young guard was very enthusiastic and described Lei Zishuan's appearance in detail. However, Zhuowen's face turned gloomy after listening to the young guard's description. Wasn't Lei Zishuan the same as the valiant woman he met? Thinking of the words Lei Zishuan said when she stopped him, he didn't pay much attention to it before. Now that he thought about it carefully, he was afraid that those words might have a deeper meaning. "Is Tong Chimei still in the sect?" Zhuowen calmed down. Although he knew that Fire Plume and Steel Plume's trip to the Lightning God's Garden boded ill, he didn't rush back to the Lightning God's Garden immediately. He had to figure out the ins and outs of the matter first. After all, the Purple Red House was a vassal force of the Lightning God's Garden. The Lightning God's Garden shouldn't kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. At least for now, the lives of Fire Plume and Steel Plume shouldn't be in danger. "You're talking about Senior Sister Tong? She's here. She just came out of seclusion a few days ago and broke through to the Dao Yuan Master Realm. She's now the most popular person in the Purple Red House." When the young guard mentioned Tong Chimei, he was beaming with joy. His eyes were filled with respect and admiration for Tong Chimei. He wasn't the only one. Most of the male disciples of the Purple Red House adored Tong Chimei, a genius who had just joined the sect. Tong Chimei possessed an Earth Dao root. Her natural talent was extremely high, and her cultivation speed was extremely fast. She hadn't even attained her Dao when she joined the Purple Red House. However, only a few dozen years had passed since she joined the Purple Red House. Not only had she attained her Dao, but she'd even broken through to the Dao Yuan Master Realm. Her cultivation speed made most of the disciples of the Purple Red House feel extremely embarrassed. It was precisely because of Tong Chimei's heaven-defying natural talent that she was publicly acknowledged as the #1 rising star of the Purple Red House. Her momentum had even surpassed Fire Plume. She was extremely popular among the younger generation of the Purple Red House. "I'm Chimei's friend. Can you help me notify her?" Zhuowen asked sincerely. The young guard hesitated for a moment before he nodded and said, "I don't think you're lying. I'll go in and notify her. As for whether Senior Sister Tong wants to see you or not, that's not something I can decide." Zhuowen cupped his hands to express his gratitude, and then the young guard entered the sect. It wasn't long before the young guard hurried over, and a beautiful woman followed behind him. Zhuowen was naturally familiar with this woman. She was Tong Chimei, who he hadn't seen for a long time. Tong Chimei's expression was indifferent, but she was slightly puzzled in her heart. She basically didn't know anyone in the Xianmi heavenly region, but someone had actually come to pay her a visit and was looking for her by name. She was extremely curious. However, when Tong Chimei's beautiful eyes descended onto the white-clothed young man, she first revealed a puzzled expression, and then it transformed into excitement. Tong Chimei let go of the reservations in her heart and quickly walked forward and threw herself into Zhuowen's arms. "Big brother Zhuo, is it really you? You've really come to the Purple Red House." Tong Chimei couldn't help but blurt out. On the other hand, the young guard was dumbstruck. He was surprised by Zhuowen's identity. Tong Chimei was the #1 genius of the Purple Red House after all. She was usually aloof and didn't come into contact with male cultivators at all. However, when Tong Chimei saw this bearded man in front of her, she immediately threw herself into his arms. He immediately knew that this man had a special relationship with Tang Chimei. Junior sister Chimei, don't be so excited. I still have many questions to ask you, Zhuowen said awkwardly. Chapter 2782. Supreme Dao Root Zhuowen followed Tang Chimei into the purple-red house. He couldn't help but shake his head as he looked around. The scale of the purple-red house's construction was barely satisfactory. It was much worse than the Anika Palace. Moreover, the number of disciples in the training grounds he passed was pitifully small. Moreover, most of them were listless. As for the cultivation of these disciples, it was too horrible to look at. Most of the disciples Zhuowen passed by had yet to attain their Dao. Zhuowen finally understood why Tang Chimei was able to become the #1 genius of the purple-red house in such a short time. The main reason was that the purple-red house's talent was too low. Moreover, Tang Chimei's talent was indeed not bad. As they walked past a plaza, Zhuowen suddenly noticed a stone tablet erected in the middle of the plaza. At this moment, a group of people surrounded the stone tablet. One of them walked up to it and placed his hand on it, causing it to emit a dazzling light. Big Brother Zhua, that's the stone tablet used to test one's Dao root. You should have seen it in the 8 heavens. Tang Chimei noticed Zhuowen's strange expression. She stopped and pointed at the stone tablet in the plaza and explained with a smile. I know. Junior sister Chimei, I want to test my Dao root. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with anticipation. When he first discovered the difficult process of attaining his Dao, he felt that his Dao root was completely different from ordinary cultivators. He really wanted to test the grade of his Dao root. Tang Chimei nodded. Her beautiful eyes were also filled with anticipation. In her impression, Zhuowen had always been an extremely heaven-defying existence. Especially when Zhuowen hadn't yet attained his Dao, he was able to suppress a Dao root expert, like Sakyamuni. Later, when they were in the Grand Brahma domains Shui Palace, Zhuowen fought against more than 10 heavenly Dao lords with his life and death boundary cultivation. He even defeated all of them. Such a battle record was absolutely shocking at that time. Even now, Tang Chimei still felt that it was slightly inconceivable. Even though Zhuowen hadn't tested his ancestral Dao root, Tang Chimei knew that so long as Zhuowen tested his ancestral Dao root, then his ancestral Dao root would definitely be a heaven rank ancestral Dao root, and it might even surpass the heaven rank ancestral Dao root. When Tang Chimei and Zhuowen arrived at the plaza, they instantly drew the attention of all the disciples on the plaza. Of course, most of their attention was on Tang Chimei. Zhuowen assessed. It's senior sister Tang Chimei. I heard that senior sister Tang Chimei was in seclusion. It seems that she has come out. I wonder what senior sister Tang Chimei is doing here. Everyone was talking about it, but what followed was confusion. Was the Dao's Dao root. Tang Chimei's ancestral Dao root was common knowledge. It was an earth-grade ancestral Dao root, and she could be considered to be a genius amongst geniuses. So, it was very unlikely that she'd come here to take the test herself. When they thought up to here, the gazes of many finally descended onto the man by Tang Chimei's side, especially when they noticed that Tang Chimei seemed to be walking slightly behind the man. Many people muttered in their hearts that this person's identity might not be ordinary. Chimei, what brings you here today? When Tang Chimei and Zhuowen had just arrived near the stone tablet, a handsome young man with a fan in his hand walked over to Tang Chimei with a charming smile on the corners of his mouth. Tang Chimei cupped her fists and spoke politely. So, it's senior brother Liu. I brought my friend here to test his Dao root. Zhuowen sized up the handsome young man from top to bottom instead. He hadn't noticed earlier, but now that he was here, he noticed that the young man's cultivation was the highest here. Just like Tang Chimei, the young man was a Dao origin master, in a declining power like the violet-red house. Those of the younger generation who were able to cultivate to the Dao origin master realm were obviously considered seed disciples that were heavily fostered. Moreover, from Tong Chimei's attitude, Zhuowen could see that senior brother Lu had a high status in the Violet Red House. Senior brother Lu's attention finally landed on Zhuowen. He sized up Zhuowen and was surprised to find that this unassuming cultivator was also a Dao origin master. However, when he saw the dense beard on Zhuowen's chin, his eyes flashed with disdain. He clearly thought that Zhuowen had cultivated for countless years to become a Dao origin master. Of course, if he knew that Zhuowen was much younger than him, he would probably be shocked. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's current appearance didn't look like a youth at all. Senior brother Lu smiled and asked, "How should I address you, friend?" "Longwen," Zhuowen replied indifferently, and then he looked at Tong Chimei and said, "Junior sister Chimei, can I test my ancestral Dao foundation right now?" Tong Chimei nodded. Zhuowen didn't hold back. He took a step forward and arrived in front of the stone tablet. He stretched out his hand and placed it on the tablet. Senior brother Lu's face was gloomy. His status in the Violet Red House was higher than Tong Chimei's. Even Tong Chimei had to be polite to him. However, this friend of Tong Chimei's was so rude. He didn't even say a word of courtesy before testing his Dao root. However, senior brother Lu was quite shrewd. He didn't lose his temper on the spot. Instead, he looked at Zhuowen with narrowed eyes. Senior brother Lu wasn't the only one. Tong Chimei and the other disciples around the stone tablet were also looking forward to it. In their opinion, since this person was Tong Chimei's friend and was a Dao origin master, his Dao root couldn't be too weak. However, they soon discovered that the stone tablet didn't react at all when Zhuowen's hand landed on it. It didn't even emit the lowest level of yellow light. Normally, there was only one possibility for such a situation to occur, and it was that the tester was a cultivator that practically didn't possess Endao root. Moreover, it was impossible for a cultivator without Endao root to successfully attain the Dao and become a Dao origin master. What's going on? Tong Chimei's beautiful pupils constricted slightly, and she revealed a surprised expression. She'd really never expected such an outcome. In her impression, Zhuowen had always been a heaven-defying genius, and his Dao root was definitely a heaven-grade Dao root, or even surpassed it. However, the result of the test was that he actually didn't possess Endao root. Such a person without Endao root was absolutely trash amongst trash, and he didn't have the slightest chance of attaining the Dao. However, Zhuowen was already a Dao origin master now. If Zhuowen really didn't possess Endao root, then how did he become a Dao origin master? It wasn't just Tong Chimei. Even senior brother Lu and the others were puzzled. Chapter 2783. Everyone questioned, "Is there something wrong with the stone steel?" Tong Chimei questioned. Senior brother Lu and the others fell silent and were unable to answer her question. On the other hand, Zhuowen withdrew his palm and revealed an expression of understanding. Zhuowen recalled the huge amount of special-grade heavenly Dao origin crystals he'd consumed when he attained his Dao all those years ago. In the end, he'd barely escaped death and successfully advanced. If it was any other cultivator, they would probably only require low-grade heavenly Dao origin crystals to advance smoothly. However, he'd required a huge amount of special-grade heavenly Dao origin crystals, and he'd almost failed in the end. Zhuowen had always thought that it might be because his main body had a special physique, but now it would seem like it wasn't because of his physique, but because of his Dao root. Because he didn't possess Endao root, logically speaking, it should be very difficult for him to attain his Dao. However, Zhuowen just so happened to be extremely wealthy and possessed so many special-grade heavenly Dao origin crystals. Coupled with the fact that Zhuowen knew nothing about Dao roots at that time, he'd acted like a fool and absorbed the special-grade heavenly Dao origin crystals without any regard for his life. In the end, Zhuowen utilized the enormous amount of energy accumulated by the special-grade heavenly Dao origin crystals to break through the shackles of his Dao root and forcefully attain his Dao. After he succeeded in attaining his Dao, Zhuan's main body's strength far surpassed cultivators of the same realm due to the baptism of the special grade Heavenly Tao origin crystals. However, there was a huge drawback to this, and it was that it was 1,000 times more difficult for the main body to advance compared to ordinary cultivators. Junior sister Chimei, I already know the reason. Let's go. Zhuowen spoke and broke the silence in the surroundings. Tong Chimei didn't ask any further. She cupped her fists to senior brother Lu before leaving the square with Zhuowen. After Tong Chimei and Zhuowen left, everyone in the surroundings was bewildered. There was even a disciple amongst them that refused to believe it and went to test the stone steel. He noticed that the stone steel glowed with yellow light. The testing stone steel isn't faulty, so why didn't it light up just now? That disciple muttered with bewilderment. On the other hand, senior brother Lu revealed a contemplative expression. He pondered deeply for a short moment before he seemed to have thought of something, and he revealed an astounded expression. He felt that his guess was too crazy. He shook his head and felt that his guess was too unreliable. In an antique room, Zhuowen casually sat in front of the tea table with a teacup in his right hand. He took a few sips before looking at Tong Chimei and asked, "Junior sister Chimei, I heard from the guard that Fire Plume and Steel Plume aren't in Violet Red Chamber right now." Tong Chimei nodded and said, "A few days ago, senior sister Fire Plume and Marshal Uncle Steel Plume went to Lightning God Garden. I heard that they were summoned by Lightning God Garden's great senior sister, Lei Zishuan. Then do you know why Lei Zishuan summoned Fire Plume and Steel Plume?" Zhuowen asked. "I'm not sure either. It was the vice sect master who informed senior sister Fire Plume and Marshal Uncle Steel Plume. I heard that it was an urgent matter. Lei Zishuan's status in Lightning God Garden is very high. With her summoning, senior sister Fire Plume and Marshal Uncle Steel Plume must go. Otherwise they'll get into trouble," Tong Chimei said softly. Zhuowen frowned. He felt that Lei Zishuan summoned Fire Plume and Steel Plume for no reason. Also, when he met Lei Zishuan for the first time, he felt that Lei Zishuan must have recognized him as Zhuowen. She just didn't expose him. However, Zhuowen couldn't figure out what Lei Zishuan was planning. "By the way, junior sister Chimei, the Violet Red Chamber is a Tao sect level faction. Why do I feel that it doesn't have the characteristics of a Tao sect level faction?" Zhuowen looked at Tong Chimei and asked. Tong Chimei sighed and said, "In fact, the Violet Red Chamber was very powerful 10,000 years ago. It was said that it was a genuine Tao sect level faction. Later on, for some unknown reason, it was besieged by numerous Tao sects, causing it to decline and fall into its current state. Actually, the Violet Red Chamber might fall out of the ranks of Tao sects and become an ordinary faction in the near future, unless another Master of Heavens will appear in the Violet Red Chamber." Zhuowen was stunned, and then he said, "Doesn't your Violet Red Chamber have a Master of Heaven's will?" "Yes, and it's the current sect master. However, it's said that the current sect master has been missing for over 10 years, and there hasn't been any news of him. A Violet Red Chamber without a sect master is utterly unable to hold on for long," said Tong Chimei in a slightly helpless tone. Zhuowen was slightly speechless. Isn't the Violet Red Chamber too trash? It actually doesn't even have a Master of Heaven's will. If he knew that the Violet Red Chamber was so unreliable, then he would absolutely not have allowed Tong Chimei to become a disciple of the Violet Red Chamber. "Big Brother Zhua, you don't have to worry about me, because I possess an earth rank ancestral Tao root. The Violet Red Chamber has been nurturing me with all its might. They hope that I've already attained the second step of the Tao and can support the entire Violet Red Chamber." Tong Chimei smiled sweetly. Knock. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Tong Chimei's beautiful brows knit together slightly as she said, "Who is it?" "Junior sister, my father is looking for you. Are you free now?" A man's voice resounded from outside the door. This voice wasn't unfamiliar to Zhuowen, and it was exactly senior brother Lu from the square, just now. During their conversation just now, Zhuowen found out from Tong Chimei that senior brother Lu's identity wasn't ordinary at all. Senior brother Lu's full name was Lu Qitian, and he was the son of the current vice sect master of the Violet Red Chamber, Lu Hao. Because the sect master of the Violet Red Chamber had been missing for a long time, the authority of the sect master was naturally temporarily taken over by Lu Hao. It could be said that Lu Hao possessed monstrous authority in the Violet Red Chamber, and he reigned supreme above everyone else. On the other hand, as Lu Hao's son, Lu Qitian's status was naturally extremely high, and it was even slightly higher than Tong Chimei's. Tong Chimei revealed a troubled expression, and she was just about to refuse when Zhuowen indicated for her to leave. When she saw Zhuowen's intentions, Tong Chimei could only reveal an apologetic expression to Zhuowen, and then she walked out of the room. Zhuowen sat cross-legged in the middle of the room, meditating with his eyes closed. After about half an incense stick's worth of time, Zhuowen abruptly opened his eyes. With a flick of his right hand, 3 rays of sword light shot out from his sleeve. They were the Thunderfire sword, the Blood Immortal sword, and the Sacrificial Death sword. The 3 divine swords were at the origin level, especially the Thunderfire sword controlled by Xiaohe. It was already at the peak of the origin level, and it wasn't far from the Heavenly Fate level. As soon as the 3 divine swords appeared, they turned into 3 rays of sword light and revolved around Zhuowen's body. Bang! 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 The moment Zhuowen summoned the 3 divine swords, a fierce attack suddenly erupted from the ground of the antique room. Upon closer inspection, the attack came from a figure wielding a foot-long crimson sword. It shot out like a bolt of lightning and arrived in front of Zhuowen in the blink of an eye. Zhuowen didn't even spare the figure a glance. Under his control, the Sacrificial Death sword swept out like a raging dragon and slashed out, forcing the figure to retreat. However, this person's speed was extremely fast. He didn't fight to the death with the Death Sacrifice sword. Instead, after clashing with the Death Sacrifice sword, he disappeared into the darkness like a phantom. He planned to escape after his attack failed. "Since you're here, why don't you stay for a cup of tea?" Zhuowen's eyes were sharp as he reached out with his right hand, like a crushing mountain. Countless waves of energy rolled out like raging waves. Chapter 2784. Blood Prison. Assassin Zhuowen pulled with his right hand, pulling the man in front of him. His right hand clutched the man's neck as he said indifferently, "Who are you? Why did you ambush me?" It was a masked man dressed in blood-red robes that exuded a strong, murderous aura. This aura reminded Zhuowen of Traceless Blood, the one he met in the 8 heavens. The man in blood-red clothes glanced at Zhuowen indifferently. There was no trace of panic in his eyes. With a soft roar, his body actually exploded. Terrifying, explosive energy surged out, instantly enveloping Zhuowen's entire body. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. Clearly, he hadn't expected the blood-robed man to self-destruct so decisively. In the end, he only had enough time to control the 3 swords to revolve around him, barely blocking the terrifying explosion. However, Tong Chimei's immortals' cave suffered a setback and completely turned into ruins. The violent explosion attracted the attention of the disciples of the Purple Red House. Tong Chimei, who was talking to Lu Hao in the conference hall, was about to turn around and leave when Lu Qitian stopped her. "Senior brother Lu, what is the meaning of this? Something happened in my cave dwelling. My friend is still in there. I must go back and check on him." Tong Chimei said anxiously. Lu Qitian said calmly, "Junior sister Chimei, you must have heard wrongly. It's rare for you to come to the conference hall. Why don't you stay for a while?" "You." Tong Chimei thought of something and looked at Lu Qitian angrily. Unfortunately, she was on par with Lu Qitian. Moreover, Lu Hao was behind her, intentionally or unintentionally, pressuring her with his powerful aura. She knew that without the consent of Lu Hao and his son, she would not be able to leave so easily. Zhuowen walked out of the ruins with murderous intent in his eyes. However, he soon sensed that something was wrong. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. 3 figures appeared under Zhuowen's feet. The figures were all dressed in blood-red clothes and wielded blood-red short swords. They attacked extremely quickly, stabbing toward Zhuowen's vital points as soon as they appeared. If it was an ordinary cultivator, they wouldn't have been able to react in time. Even if they did, they wouldn't have been able to block the terrifying attack that had enveloped all of their vital points. Zhuowen snorted coldly and gave up on defending. Instead, he activated the 3 swords, which turned into 3 streaks of light and stabbed towards the foreheads of the 3 blood-robed men. Originally, Zhuowen thought that the 3 of them would turn around and defend against the attack of the 3 swords. However, to his surprise, the 3 blood-red, clothed men also gave up on defense. They ignored the divine sword that was flying towards their forehead and focused on piercing Zhuowen's vital points with their sharp weapons. Puchi! 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 The 3 divine swords completely pierced through the foreheads of the 3 blood-red, clothed men. However, the blood-red short swords in the hands of the 3 blood-red, clothed men also stabbed into Zhuowen's vital points. Unfortunately, Zhuowen had the 4-star Pangu sacred body. The blood-red short swords of the 3 blood-red, clothed men couldn't even leave a trace on Zhuowen's body. All of their attacks were blocked by Zhuowen's body. Before the 3 blood-red, clothed men died, they looked at the scene in disbelief. They couldn't imagine how the body of the man in front of them could be so terrifying. Their attacks couldn't even leave a trace on his body. However, they didn't have time to figure out why this happened. After the divine sword pierced their foreheads, they died completely. After killing the 3 blood-red, clothed men, Zhuowen stopped in the ruins. After finding that there was no other movement, he sat cross-legged in a relatively intact place. There were a total of 4 blood-red, clothed men who attacked him. The 4 blood-red, clothed men weren't very strong. They were probably only Daoyuan masters. With such strength, they weren't even qualified to hurt him. However, Zhuowen was gloomy because of the 4 blood-red, clothed men's powerful concealment ability. If the blood-red, clothed men hadn't revealed their killing intent at the beginning, Zhuowen wouldn't have even noticed. Although the 4 blood-red, clothed men were just clowns to him, if an Eternal Overlord expert had such a powerful concealment ability, Zhuowen knew that if they launched a surprise attack on him, his life might not be in danger, but he would definitely be injured. Thinking of this, Zhuowen couldn't wait to find out the origins of the 4 blood-red, clothed men. Of course, he didn't know anything about the 4 blood-red, clothed men. He was now waiting for the deputy sect master of the Purple Red House, Lu Hao, to give him an explanation. Before long, many disciples of the Purple Red House gathered around the ruins. When they saw Tong Chimei's cave dwelling in ruins and the 4 blood-red, clothed men lying in the rubble, and Zhuowen sitting cross-legged on the side unscathed, they discussed spiritedly and guessed what had just happened. The 4 blood-red, clothed men should be assassins. Judging from their clothes, they seemed to be assassins from the blood prison. Assassins from the blood prison? How is that possible? That's a very powerful assassin organization. Why would they appear in our Purple Red House? I'm afraid they're here for this person. Who is this person? How could he attract assassins from the blood prison? Will he bring disaster to our Purple Red House? Although the discussions were soft, Zhuowen's hearing was extremely powerful. He quickly recognized the 4 blood-red, clothed men's origins. Blood prison? Zhuowen's eyes were cold. He didn't know much about the blood prison. The only thing he knew was that Xue Wuhen, whom he had rescued, was a member of the blood prison. After Xue Wuhen was rescued by him, he didn't even say a word of thanks before leaving. This made Zhuowen have a bad impression of Xue Wuhen and the blood prison behind him. Zhuowen didn't provoke the blood prison at all, but the blood prison assassins actually took the initiative to provoke him. This made Zhuowen's chest fill with anger. What's wrong? What's going on here? Someone actually dares to destroy my cave dwelling in my purple-red house? Are they tired of living? Suddenly, a voice came from the front. Zhuo Wen turned his head, and a cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. The owner of this voice was Lu Qitian. At this moment, there was a middle-aged man beside him. Zhuo Wen could guess the identity of this person. It should be the deputy sect master of the purple-red house, Lu Hao. Tong Chimei followed behind the two at this moment, her beautiful eyes filled with guilt. Big brother Zhuo Wen, I'm sorry. I didn't know this would happen. It was the deputy sect master who stopped me from coming back. Tong Chimei sent a voice transmission to Zhuo Wen and sincerely apologized. Of course, Zhuo Wen didn't think this matter had anything to do with Tong Chimei. His eyes fell on Lu Qitian and Lu Hao. Your sect master, Lu? I was a guest in your purple-red house, but now I've been assassinated. Your purple-red house should take responsibility for this matter. Zhuo Wen looked at Lu Hao and said coldly. Lu Hao walked to a spot not far from Zhuo Wen and looked at the four blood-red, clothed men with a hint of surprise in his eyes. Chapter 2785. Exposed, you still want an explanation from me? The corner of Zhuo Wen's mouth turned even colder as he stared at Lu Hao. Zhuo Wen's stare sent shivers down Lu Hao's spine, but he didn't dare to speak, especially when he saw how easily this kid killed the four blood prison assassins. He knew that this kid's strength wasn't ordinary. However, Zhuo Wen's aura was only that of a Dao Yuan master. No matter how strong he was, Lu Qitian didn't think this kid was his opponent. After all, he was already a half-step Heaven's Mandate Master, the strongest expert in Purple-Red House. How dare you? Do you know who you're talking to now? These four assassins are obviously here for you. Your battle destroyed our Purple-Red House's cavern. Yet you still dare to be so arrogant? Lu Qitian sneered and continued. Men, take down this arrogant guy for me. As soon as Lu Qitian finished speaking, two old men rushed out and bombarded Zhuo Wen with powerful attacks. These two old men were elders of Purple-Red House. Both of them were Hunyuan masters. In Lu Qitian's opinion, two Hunyuan masters should be more than enough to take down a Dao Yuan master. Unfortunately, the next scene completely stunned him. Zhuo Wen casually threw out two palms, and the two Hunyuan masters screamed in pain as they spat out mouthfuls of blood and crashed heavily on the ground, completely losing the ability to fight. Zhuo Wen did not kill off the two old men. Purple-Red House was Fire Feather and Steel Feather's sect, after all. Not to mention, the two of them had helped him in the past. Thus, it was only natural that Zhuo Wen would not casually kill them in Purple-Red House. After defeating the two old men in an instant, Zhuo Wen grabbed Lu Qitian, who was still in a daze, by the neck and lifted him up. You, let me go. Lu Qitian continued to struggle, but he was unable to break free from Zhuo Wen's powerful restraint. He was firmly held in Zhuo Wen's palm. Lu Hao's gaze was gloomy, but he did not act rashly. Instead, he grabbed Tong Chimei's shoulder and said coldly, Sir, what do you mean by this? Hurry up and let go of Qi Tian. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. Tong Chimei revealed a look of disbelief when she heard Lu Hao's words. She didn't expect Lu Hao to say such words. She was, after all, a disciple of the Purple-Red House, yet Lu Hao wanted to kill her. Zhuo Wen's eyes were filled with killing intent. This Lu Hao really had no bottom line. He actually used his own sect's disciple to threaten him. Don't worry, your son won't do anything to you. Now, I just want you to confirm where Fire Plume and Steel Plume have gone. Zhuo Wen asked coldly. Tong Chimei said that the news of Lei Zishuan summoning Fire Plume and Steel Plume was provided by Lu Hao, so Fire Plume and Steel Plume left the Purple-Red House in a hurry. Zhuo Wen was targeted by the blood prison assassins after entering Tong Chimei's cave mansion. In his view, all of this was not a coincidence. Lu Hao and his son must have known about it. If his guess was correct, Fire Plume and Steel Plume might be under house arrest by Lazy Xuan, and the reason for this might have something to do with him. Humph. Fire Plume and Steel Plume were summoned by Lazy Xuan. Why are you asking me? Lu Hao said coldly. Zhuowen sneered again and again. His right hand turned into a claw and grabbed Lu Qitian's head, and a powerful divine sense poured into his soul. What is the purpose of Lei Zixuan summoning Fire Plume and Steel Plume? Zhuowen asked indifferently. Lu Qitian's soul was in chaos, so when he heard Zhuowen's question, he did not hesitate to tell him everything he knew. After listening to Lu Qitian's words, Zhuowen's face turned ugly. Even Tong Qimei and the other disciples showed gloomy expressions. Fire Plume was the daughter of the sect master, and the current sect master had been missing for a long time. Fire Plume was the first successor of the Purple Red House, but Lu Hao was afraid of the position of sect master and tried every means to get rid of Fire Plume. This time, Lu Hao found out from somewhere that the death of the Huangji family's third young master seemed to be related to Fire Plume and Steel Plume. Moreover, Huang Wu had come to the Thunder God Garden to ask for them, and Lei Litian had agreed, waiting for Huang Wu to come again and take them away. Knowing this, Lu Hao contacted the Thunder God Garden's eldest senior sister, Lei Zixuan, and plotted to lure Fire Plume and Steel Plume to Lei Zixuan's place, then put Fire Plume and Steel Plume under house arrest, waiting for the Huangji family's people to come and take them away. As for why the blood prison assassins appeared here, Lu Hao and Lu Qitian had no idea. After all, the blood prison assassins came and went without a trace. Zhuowen patted Lu Qitian's head, and Lu Qitian immediately sobered up. However, he clearly remembered what he had done just now. When he thought of how he had actually let it slip, his face instantly became ghastly pale. Lu Hao's face was also ugly. After all, Fire Plume was the sect master's daughter, and in order to covet the sect master's position, he had schemed to harm Fire Plume and Steel Plume. This kind of thing could only be done in secret, but now it was openly exposed by Zhuowen and in front of so many disciples of the Purple Red House. For a time, the surroundings were in an uproar, setting off a wave of discussion. Everyone's gaze towards Lu Hao and Lu Qitian became contemptuous and disdainful. Nonsense. You must have used some despicable means just now. What you said just now was nonsense. Lu Qitian hurriedly defended himself. Zhuowen ignored Lu Qitian and looked coldly at Lu Hao. I'll give you a chance now. Let go of junior sister Qimei and get the hell out of the Purple Red House. If you do that, I might spare your dog lives. Lu Hao's eyes turned gloomy. This Zhuowen was too presumptuous. He actually dared to ask them to get the hell out of the Purple Red House. I'm the Purple Red House's deputy, sect master. Who do you think you are? You don't have the qualifications to ask us to get the hell out of the Purple Red House. Lu Hao said coldly, Today, I'll let you see whether I have the qualifications or not. Zhuowen said, and with a stomp of his right foot, a divine sort of lightning and fire flew out from under Lu Hao's feet. Terrifying lightning and fire energy formed an incomparably huge dragon, whistling through the air. Lu Hao was caught off guard, and the angle of the lightning fire sword was extremely tricky, slashing at his right hand that was holding Tong Qimei. If he didn't let go of Tong Qimei, his right hand would be cut off by the lightning fire sword. Helpless, he could only let go of Tong Qimei and retreat. Tong Qimei took this opportunity to break free from Lu Hao's grasp and came to Zhuowen's side. Big brother Zhuo, you saved me again. Tong Qimei said gratefully, You and I are friends. There's no need to thank me. Zhuowen shook his head and looked at Lu Hao. At this moment, Lu Hao was already engaged in battle with the lightning fire sword. The lightning fire sword's strength was terrifying. It was already a peak, primordial grade divine tool. Moreover, The lightning and fire energy it carried was even more terrifying, as if there was nothing it couldn't burn. Lu Hao was wary of the lightning and fire energy on the lightning fire sword. Chapter 2786. Lei Zishuanjuan waved his sleeves, and the blood immortal sword and death sacrifice sword turned into two streaks of light as they flew out and joined with the thunder fire sword to form a powerful sword array. With the addition of the blood immortal sword and death sacrifice sword, Lu Hao, who was originally at a disadvantage, was in a dire situation. After a dozen rounds, Lu Hao let out a blood-curdling scream as the thunder fire sword pierced through his chest and turned him into ashes. Plop! Zhuowen handed the dazed Lu Qitian over to Tong Qimei and said, "Junior Sister Qimei, I'll leave him to you." The surrounding disciples all kept quiet out of fear, and their gazes toward Zhuowen were filled with reverence. Although Lu Hao was the vice sect master of Purple Red House, he didn't have much prestige in the sect. Now that it was revealed that he had plotted to kill Huiyu and Gangyu in order to seize the sect master's position, they didn't have much of a reaction to Lu Hao's death. "Big Brother Zhuo, are you going to the Thunder God's Garden?" After Tong Qimei ordered the other disciples to lock up Lu Qitian, her beautiful eyes fell on Zhuowen as she asked worriedly, "Yes, Fire Plume and Steel Plume are my friends. Since they're in trouble, I can't just leave them be. However, the Thunder God's Garden isn't a good person. Since they dared to kill Fire Plume and Steel Plume, will they deal with the Purple Red House?" Zhuowen said with a frown. Tong Qimei shook her head and said they won't. Although the Purple Red House has declined greatly, it's still a vassal force of the Thunder God's Garden. If the Thunder God's Garden dares to touch the Purple Red House, it will chill the hearts of the other vassal forces of the Thunder God's Garden. Unless the Thunder God's Garden doesn't need any vassal forces, they won't deal with the Purple Red House. Zhuowen nodded. Tong Qimei was right. The Purple Red House was a vassal force of the Thunder God's Garden. The Thunder God's Garden wouldn't kill the goose that laid the golden eggs. As for Fire Plume and Steel Plume, Zhuowen knew that the Thunder God's Garden would only agree to hand them over because Huang Wu came to ask for them. Huang Wu must have paid a price. If that was the case, Zhuowen was confident that the Thunder God's Garden would be able to bail the Thunder God's palace. Steel Plume and Steel Plume. Zhuowen was Zhuowen's of the palace's garden. Huang was Huang, was Demon's sword. Blood Rain sacrifice was of the gardens of heaven. The blood rain of hell, of heaven, of heaven, of heaven, of heaven, of heaven, of heaven. Big Brother Zhuo, you have to be careful. You should be targeted by the blood prison. Blood of blood rain of hell sect, blood, sect blood king of blood of blood. It is said that the cultivators targeted by the blood prison will face the endless pursuit of the blood prison assassins until they die. Only then will the blood prison assassins stop. Tong Qimei reminded him with a melancholy look on her face. She had stayed in the Purple Red House for a period of time, so she knew a lot about the host region. The blood prison was famous for its ferocity. Got it. Zhuowen nodded, but his eyes were full of murderous intent. If the blood prison didn't let him go, then they shouldn't blame Zhuowen for being ruthless. Zhuowen had never suffered a loss since he started cultivating. If the blood prison really angered him, he would break into the blood prison station and destroy them. Of course, he didn't have the strength to do so at the moment, unless his Pangus sacred body reached the 6 stars realm. Once his Pangus sacred body reached the 6 stars realm, his strength would reach an unfathomable level. Zhuowen basically didn't care about a Dao Palace level force like the Huangji family. When Zhuowen left the Purple Red House's teleportation array and appeared in the Thunder God Park's teleportation array, an unfamiliar cultivator stopped in front of him. Looking at the cultivator's attire, Zhuowen knew that this person was from the Thunder God Park. "Sir, our senior sister invites you in." The person looked at Zhuowen and said indifferently, Zhuowen didn't care about this person's attitude and said, "Are you Lei Zixuan?" In fact, from the moment he entered the Thunder God Park and met Lei Zixuan, he knew that he had fallen into the Thunder God Park's surveillance. However, Zhuowen didn't care. He had no enmity with the Thunder God Park, and the Huangji family didn't have a good relationship with the Thunder God Park. He didn't believe that the Thunder God Park would be willing to use the Huangji family as a lackey to deal with him. When the cultivator heard Zhuowen call out Lei Zixuan's name directly, he didn't look happy. However, he didn't say anything and just told Zhuowen to follow him. Then he walked forward. Zhuowen followed behind. The two of them didn't speak along the way. Soon, they arrived in front of a tower-shaped restaurant. This restaurant was also surrounded by lightning. From afar, it looked like a huge lightning tower. In the huge restaurant, only one table was occupied. The rest of the tables were empty and looked very empty. A valiant woman sat quietly at the only table. Behind her were two maids who were waiting respectfully on both sides. The valiant woman also noticed the arrival of Zhuowen. She raised the wine cup in her hand and looked at Zhuowen with a smile on her face. Zhuowen came to the opposite side of Lei Zixuan's table and sat down casually. He also raised the wine cup on the table and drank it in one gulp. "Aren't you afraid that the wine is poisoned?" Lei Zixuan asked with a smile. "Could it be that you invited me here only to poison me?" Zhuowen asked instead of answering. Lei Zixuan laughed heartily. She didn't have the slightest shyness of a girl. She personally filled Zhuowen's cup and said with a smile, "You must be the Zhuowen who caused a ruckus in the Huangji family, right?" "So what if I am?" Miss Lei spent so much effort to put Fire Plume and Steel Plume under house arrest. "Could it be that your goal is to see me?" Zhuowen said casually. Lei Zixuan was very straightforward and said, "That's right. Brother Zhuo's whereabouts are mysterious and unpredictable. I just happen to know that Fire Plume and Steel Plume have a close relationship with Brother Zhuo. Therefore, I could only come up with this plan. Now, it seems that my plan is the best one. Brother Zhuo is a loyal and righteous person. He really came." Zhuowen drank silently and said indifferently, "Why are you or your Thunder God's Park looking for me? Could it be for the Huangji family's reward?" Lei Zixuan laughed and said, "Brother Zhuo, you're underestimating our Thunder God's Park too much. Although the Huangji family is also a Dao Palace level power, it's still lacking when compared to our Thunder God's Park. Moreover, the Huangji family suffered disastrous losses because of Brother Zhuo's ruckus. Now, they're not even in our Thunder God's Park's eyes. Do you think it's necessary for me to capture you for the Huangji family's small reward? Oh, then what's your goal?" Zhuowen asked back. Chapter 2787. Pill Rhythm Meeting. As soon as Lei Zixuan finished speaking, the beautiful expressions of the two female attendants behind her changed slightly, and their gazes at Zhuowen were filled with envy. Lei Zixuan was the most talented junior in Lightning God Park. She'd cultivated for less than 1,000 years, yet she was already an eternal overlord, and her natural talent was much greater than the Huangji clan's galaxy of stars. Moreover, Lei Zixuan had shocked the world with a single brilliant feat during the ancestral Dao Root test, and it was a heaven-grade ancestral Dao Root. Heaven-grade ancestral Dao Roots were extremely rare, and they usually appeared in Dao Palace level powers. It was very rare for a heaven-grade ancestral Dao Root to appear in a Dao Palace level power. Once such a genius appeared, then the Dao Palace level power was bound to rise up and surpass the other Dao Palaces. This obviously showed how noble and unique Lei Zixuan's status in Lightning God Park was. If Zhuowen were to join Lightning God Park now, then he would actually be able to stand on equal footing with Lei Zixuan. This obviously showed how highly Lei Zixuan thought of Zhuowen. However, the two female attendants were puzzled because Zhuowen still shook his head and refused. Lei Zixuan's expression was slightly unsightly. She'd already personally invited Zhuowen and promised him such a high status. Yet this kid had actually refused. Could it be that he felt it wasn't enough? Brother Joie, do you think it isn't enough? Lei Zishuan's voice turned slightly cold. Zhuowen shook his head and said, I don't like being restrained, so I've always rarely joined other powers. I hope Miss Lei can forgive me. Besides that, I heard your Lightning God Park intends to hand over Fire Plume and Steel Plume to the Huangji clan's Huangwu. At this moment, Lei Zishuan's attitude wasn't good. She'd already personally invited him. Yet this kid actually didn't appreciate it at all. Yes, Huangwu gave you the eternal pills. With our court master's temperament, handing over 2 people is definitely a good deal. Of course, if Brother Joie is willing to join the Thunder God Garden, then with your friendship with Fire Plume and Steel Plume, the court master will definitely help you protect Fire Plume and Steel Plume. Lei Zishuan said, unwilling to give up. Zhuowen's eyes flickered as he took out a divine herb from his spirit ring and handed it to Lei Zishuan. This divine herb is worth more than an eternal pill. If Lei Zishuan is willing to let go of Fire Plume and Steel Plume, this divine herb is yours. Lei Zishuan looked at the divine herb in Zhuowen's hand, and her beautiful eyes narrowed in shock. This stalk of divine medicine looked like a stalk of grass. On the surface of the grass there were green vines, and at the top of the vines there was a white sun. This sun was lifelike, just like a real white sun. However, it was only the size of a palm, like a mini sun, but the temperature it released was extremely terrifying. If it weren't for the fact that Zhuowen and Lei Zishuan were very strong, they probably wouldn't have been able to withstand the terrifying temperature released by the white sun above the grass. This is the white cloud vine. Lei Zishuan looked at the grass in front of her, and her beautiful eyes narrowed in shock. This white cloud vine was a half-step Genesis, grade divine herb. Its value might be similar to an eternal pill, but in terms of rarity, this white cloud vine was much more precious than an eternal pill. If she had to choose between this white cloud vine and an eternal pill, Lei Zishuan would definitely choose this white cloud vine without hesitation. Brother Joie, although your divine herb is precious, the court master has already promised Huangwu. If you go back on your word now, I'm afraid Huangwu won't agree. Lei Zishuan voiced her concern. However, Zhuowen smiled slightly and took out another divine herb from his spirit ring. This divine herb was in the shape of a flower. There were 7 petals, and each petal was a different color, as if they were a rainbow. Rainbow divine flower? Lei Zishuan was shocked. This rainbow divine flower was also a half-step Genesis grade divine herb, and it was even more precious than the white cloud vine. What if we add this rainbow divine flower? Zhuowen asked. Lei Zishuan frowned slightly, and she hesitated. It was unknown what she was thinking, but she was clearly weighing the pros and cons when brought out a half-step god of creation, tier godly medicine, and passed it to Lei Zishuan. Finally, as if Lei Zishuan had made up her mind, she looked at Zhuowen and said, Brother Joie, these 3 half-step Genesis grade divine herbs are far more valuable than eternal pills. However, I'm afraid I'll have to ask the court master personally to change her mind. Zhuowen nodded. Lei Zishuan indeed couldn't make this decision. Brother Joie, I see that you can easily take out so many divine herbs. Could it be that you also know alchemy? Lei Zishuan calmed down, and she looked at Zhuowen as she asked, I know a thing or 2. Moreover, I'm only a chaotic prime grade alchemist, Zhuowen said, slightly ashamed. In his opinion, his alchemy skills were too low, and he couldn't compare to those true alchemy grandmasters. However, Lei Zishuan was surprised. She knew that Zhuowen wasn't very old, so even if he knew alchemy, his alchemy skills wouldn't be very high. However, she never thought that Zhuowen would actually be a primordial chaos level alchemist. Although there were quite a few alchemists of this level in their Thunder God Garden, a young primordial chaos level alchemist like Zhuowen was actually considered a minority. Lei Zishuan's beautiful eyes flickered, and she suddenly smiled and said, Brother Joie, since you are also an alchemist, why don't you represent my Thunder God Park in the host region's Pill Rhythm Grand Assembly? Pill Rhythm Grand Assembly. Zhuowen revealed a surprised look, and he looked at Lei Zixuan in confusion. You don't know about the Pill Rhythm Grand Assembly? Lei Zixuan looked at Zhuowen speechlessly. Zhuowen revealed an embarrassed smile. He really didn't know much about the host region. Lei Zixuan saw Zhuowen's expression and knew that the latter really didn't know about it. She could only patiently explain it to Zhuowen. After listening to Lei Zixuan's explanation, Zhuowen finally understood what the so-called Pill Rhythm Grand Assembly was all about. Xian, Mi Heavenly Domain had a total of 5 Dao domains. The 4 mainstream Dao domains were the host region, South region, West region, and North region. In addition to these 4 mainstream Dao domains, there was a 5th Dao domain called the Pill Array Dao domain. It was said that it was the holy land of alchemists and array masters. Most of the famous third-step pill array masters in the Xian, Mi Heavenly Domain, came from the Pill Array Dao domain. The Pill Array Dao domain had a huge influence, and it had set up branches in the 4 mainstream Dao domains. The name of these branches was the Pill Array Immortal Alliance. The Pill Array Immortal Alliance was very powerful. Just the Pill Array Immortal Alliance in the East Dao domain was more powerful and influential than the Dao palaces. Even the 5 major Dao palaces in the host region had to give face to the Pill Array Immortal Alliance. This Pill Rhythm Grand Assembly was also organized by the Pill Array Immortal Alliance. Moreover, the Pill Rhythm Grand Assembly's rewards were very generous. As long as one could obtain first place in this Pill Rhythm Grand Assembly, it was said that one would have the opportunity to enter the Pill Array Pagoda in the Pill Array Immortal Alliance to comprehend the Grand Tao of Pill Arrays. It was said that the Grand Tao of Pill Arrays in the Pill Array Pagoda could reveal the secrets of the 3rd step of Pill Arrays. It was a mystic realm that all the Pill Array masters in the host region yearned to enter. After all, as long as one could advance to the 3rd step of Pill Arrays, they would receive endless glory and status. In the 4 major Dao domains, which force would not give face to a 3rd step Pill Array master. I want to participate in this Pill Rhythm Grand Assembly. If the Thunder God Park can give me a spot, I, Zhuowen, will owe the Thunder God Park a favor, Zhuowen said seriously. Moyan Wushang's 6 spiritual desires had been lost, and he had been in a coma. With his current level of alchemy, he had no way to save Moyan Wushang. He needed to reach the 3rd step of alchemy before he could have the chance to save Moyan Wushang. Moreover, the Pill Array Immortal Alliance had a 3rd step, Dao, confirming Pill Master. If he performed well in the Pill Rhythm Grand Assembly, he might be able to ask a 3rd step, Dao, confirming Pill Master to save Moyan Wushang. Chapter 2788. Guest Alchemy Mystura. Trace of a smile appeared in the corners of Lei Zixuan's mouth when she saw Zhuowen agree. She continued, Brother Zhuo, you're representing our Thunder God Garden to participate in the Pill Tempering Grand Assembly. So, you must prove that you're related to our Thunder God Garden. What do you mean? Zhuowen frowned. Lei Zixuan smiled and said, How about this? You can become a guest alchemy master of the Thunder God Garden. A guest alchemy master has a lot of freedom. As long as you provide the Thunder God Garden with 10 batches of elixirs that correspond to your level, the Thunder God Garden will not restrict you. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. In the end, he decided to become a guest alchemy master of the Thunder God Garden. Since Lei Zixuan had given him one of the spots to participate in the Pill Tempering Grand Assembly, he was a little embarrassed to reject Lei Zixuan's invitation. Lei Zixuan's status was very high, but she was not overbearing. Her character was also good. If he rejected her, it would be unreasonable. Thank you for thinking so highly of me. Zhuowen cupped his fists and said. Lei Zixuan finally smiled. She was satisfied that Zhuowen had agreed to become a guest alchemy master of the Thunder God Garden. Although Zhuowen's aura was only that of a Dao Yuan master, he was able to create havoc in the Huangji family and kill the experts of the Huangji family, Huang Wuqi and Huang Lin. This showed that he was not ordinary. Such a person could only be roped in and could not be offended. Brother Joie, I have already arranged a good room for you in this restaurant. Wait for me for a few days. I need to report this matter to the garden master. As long as the garden master agrees, this matter will be easy to handle. Lei Zixuan stood up and said with a smile. Zhuowen did not say anything. Lei Zixuan cupped her fists at Zhuowen and left. In the next few days, Zhuowen basically cultivated in seclusion in the room that Lei Zixuan had arranged for him. Lei Zixuan was very attentive. She had specially arranged a beautiful maid to take care of his food and daily life. Although Zhuowen had acquiesced, he did not specially send the maid to do things for him. Instead, he asked the maid not to disturb his seclusion. These few days, Zhuowen had been studying alchemy Dao all along. His alchemy Dao level had long reached the peak of the primordial chaos realm and was not far from the heavenly fate realm. Moreover, he had the mysterious alchemy book and the Emperor Pillfire's alchemy Dao experience. Now that he had settled down to research alchemy, it could be said that he had benefited greatly, advancing by leaps and bounds. On the 5th day, Zhuowen's eyes flashed with understanding. He immediately waved his sleeve and summoned the Emperor Pill Furnace. The Pill Monarch Turtle slowly came out of the pill furnace and looked at Zhuowen suspiciously. Pill Monarch Turtle, now I'm going to refine the Heavenly Mandate Master. This time, I'm going to completely advance to the Heavenly Mandate level. Zhuowen only said this one sentence to the Pill Emperor Turtle. Then he meticulously took out the herbs needed to refine the Heavenly Mandate Pill from his great world. His macro world could be said to be a huge treasure trove. The things he had obtained over the years were basically placed in his macro world. In addition, the items in the Huangji family's treasury were also placed in the great world. It could be said that the foundation of Zhuowen's macro world was actually not weaker than the foundation of an ordinary Dao Palace level force. Divine herbs such as the Heavenly Mandate Pill were simply a dime a dozen in his macro world. Zhuowen focused on alchemy. After failing 9 batches, he finally succeeded on the 10th batch. After successfully refining the Heavenly Mandate Pill, Zhuowen's understanding of alchemy, Dao, reached a new level. At this moment, Zhuowen had a new understanding of alchemy Dao. Zhuowen knew that his alchemy Dao level had smoothly advanced to the Heavenly Mandate realm, especially the mysterious alchemy book. When his alchemy Dao level reached the Heavenly Mandate realm, a Heavenly Mandate Pill art appeared in the book. Zhuowen knew that after mastering this pill art, his success rate in refining Heavenly Mandate divine pills would reach more than 90%. Moreover, the divine pills he refined would be of top-grade quality. His alchemy Dao level would undoubtedly far surpass ordinary Heavenly Mandate alchemists. After Zhuowen's alchemy Dao level advanced to the Heavenly Mandate realm, he received a message from Lei Zixuan. When Zhuowen opened the door, the servant girl was already waiting outside. She respectfully bowed to Zhuowen. Lord Joie, eldest senior sister, has been waiting for you downstairs for a long time. The servant girl said respectfully, "Lead the way." Zhuowen only said one sentence before following the servant girl down the stairs. Today, the restaurant was still empty. Only Lei Zixuan's table was occupied. He knew that Lei Zixuan had reserved the entire restaurant again. This time, apart from Lei Zixuan, Zhuowen also saw a man and a woman behind Lei Zixuan. Zhuowen was no stranger to this man and woman. They were the targets of his trip, Fire Plume and Steel Plume. Fire Plume and Steel Plume obviously noticed Zhuowen as well. Their eyes lit up with joy. "Congratulations, Alchemist Joie. The court master has agreed to your deal, and he's willing to give you a spot to participate in the pill pageant." Lei Zixuan stood up and greeted Zhuowen. "It's all thanks to Miss Lei's help. Here are the white cloud vine, rainbow divine flower, and wild goose flower. Take them and hand them over to Court Master Lei. Zhuo clasped his hands in thanks and handed over the 3 half-step Genesis tier godly medicines to Lei Zishuan. After putting away the 3 godly medicines, Lei Zishuan took out a jade pendant and handed it to Zhuo. This is the identity token of a guest alchemist. Alchemist Zhuo, keep it well. Will inform Pill Master Zhuo when the Pill Grand Assembly begins. Zhuo nodded. He didn't care too much as long as he could participate in the pill pageant. Brother Zhuo, I owe you another favor. Fire Plume and Steel Plume walked up to Zhuo, their eyes filled with shame. Zhuo waved a hand, gesturing for the 2 of them not to take offense. Alchemist Zhuo, take your time. I have some matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave first. Oh, right, the pill pageant will start in 3 months, so we have to set off a month in advance. You have to come to the teleportation plaza of the Lightning God's Garden in 2 months. Otherwise, it'll be treated as a forfeit. After saying this, Lei Zishuan left with her subordinates. Her movements weren't sluggish in the slightest. Brother Zhuo, how did you know we were in trouble? Fire Plume walked up to Zhuo and asked in confusion. Fire Plume knew that she and Steel Plume had been summoned by Lei Zishuan. Normal people wouldn't suspect that they were under house arrest and were waiting to be delivered to Huangwu. Zhuo recounted everything that had happened in the Purple Red House in detail. Fire Plume fell silent. In the end, she sighed softly and said, I never thought that Lu Hao and his son would be so ambitious. I've always felt that something was wrong with them. However, the Purple Red House is truly too weak. I thought that they would prioritize the bigger picture, but it looks like I was too arrogant. Chapter 2789. Tyrannical Sectfire Plume looked at Zhuo with bright eyes and said, Brother Zhuo, since you are so strong, why don't you become the sovereign of Purple Red House? You have helped me so many times. This is the only way I can repay you. Zhuo shook his head and said, I am not suitable to be the sovereign, and I am not a member of Purple Red House. If I suddenly become your sovereign, I am afraid it will only make things worse for the Purple Red House. You can be the sovereign of Purple Red House yourself. I heard from Junior Sister Chime that you are the sovereign's daughter, so you are the most qualified to be the sovereign of Purple Red House. Steel Plume quickly added, Young Miss, Brother Zhuo is right. In Purple Red House, you're the only legitimate candidate to be the sovereign of Purple Red House. Fire Plume hesitated, but nodded in the end. Just as Zhuo said, if Purple Red House was still in a state of disunity, it would not last long. Brother Zhuo, let's go back to the Purple Red House. I have something to give you. Fire Plume suddenly said to Zhuo in a serious tone. Steel Plume's eyes narrowed, as if he thought of something, opened his mouth, but did not say anything in the end. What is it? Zhuo did not know what was going on and asked curiously. This is a very important thing. I will tell you when we return to Purple Red House. For now, come with us. Fire Plume shook his head and said mysteriously. Zhuo thought for a moment. There was still some time before the Pill Tempering Conference, and it was not impossible for him to stay in Purple Red House for a while, so he agreed to Fire Plume's request. In the main hall of the Lightning God's Garden, Lei Litian stood at the top while Lei Zishuan stood at the bottom, looking at Lei Litian with longing in her eyes. Zishuan, this Zhuo is only a Dao Yuan master, but he was able to kill the third headmaster of the Huangji family, Huang Lin, and the strongest genius, Huang Wuqi. Moreover, he was able to escape from the Huangji family's encirclement unscathed. How do you think he did it? Lei Litian looked at Lei Zishuan and suddenly asked. Lei Zishuan frowned slightly and said softly, There's a huge secret on him. Moreover, I heard that he emptied the Huangji family's treasury. Huangwu was so angry that his lungs almost exploded. But even so, Huangwu merely issued an arrest warrant and clearly stated that he would offer a reward for the capture of this child alive. I find it very strange. Huangwu seems to really want Zhuo alive. Could it be that he wants to interrogate him for something? Lei Litian roared with laughter and said, Zixuan, you're right. This sly old fox, Huangwu, is someone who takes revenge for the smallest grievance. Zhuowen has already annihilated so many geniuses and higher-ups of the Huangji clan and even plundered their treasury. Logically speaking, Huangwu would definitely kill Zhuowen to vent his anger. But this old fox didn't do that and wants to capture him alive. There's something fishy about this. Lei Zixuan's beautiful eyes flickered. She looked at Lei Litian and said hesitantly, Court Master, if Zhuowen really has a huge secret on him, why don't we just take action and recruit Zhuowen? Lei Litian smiled and said, There's no need to be so anxious. This child isn't simple. Since he can wreak havoc in the Huangji family, it means that he has some ability. Now that this child is like fire and water with the Huangji family, why should we get involved? Why don't we just watch the fire from the other side of the river? Who knows, we might even be the Oriole behind. Lei Zixuan's beautiful eyes lit up, and she quickly bowed. Court Master is wise. After returning to the purple-red house, Zhuowen found that the number of disciples in the house had decreased. He knew that the fall of Lu Hao had caused many disciples to see no hope for the purple-red house to rise again. Hence, another batch of disciples left. Fire Plume's beautiful face was full of sighs, but there was nothing she could do. In the next few days, Fire Plume reorganized the purple-red house and took over as the new sovereign. The originally dispirited and scattered purple-red house finally recovered a part of its vitality because of Fire Plume's succession. At least they now had a backbone. Seeing that the purple-red house was finally on the right track, Fire Plume's heart also relaxed a little. On this day, Fire Plume came looking for Zhuowen. Big brother Zhuowen, come with me. Fire Plume said to Zhuowen. Zhuowen nodded and followed Fire Plume. Fire Plume brought Zhuowen to the main hall of the purple-red house. At this moment, other than Zhuowen and Fire Plume, there was no one else. Brother Zhuo, I've told you before that I have something to give to you. Consider it as repayment for saving my life several times. Fire Plume said with a complicated expression. Zhuowen nodded, but he didn't care. The purple-red house was in such a state of decline that he couldn't think of anything precious that could be stored there. The great world in his possession was a true treasure trove. Its foundation far exceeded that of the purple-red house. However, he also knew that this was Fire Plume's goodwill. If he refused, Fire Plume would lose face. Brother Zhuo, do you know the origin of the Dao art you obtained, the tyrannical Dao butchering art? Fire Plume suddenly looked at Zhuowen and asked in a deep voice. Zhuowen was stunned and immediately shook his head. However, he had heard about the tyrannical Dao butchering art after entering the Xian, Mi celestial domain, especially when he learned that the tyrannical Dao butchering art was an extremely incomplete Dao art that could only be cultivated to the primordial Chaos Lord level. The last two moves of the tyrannical Dao butchering art were given to him by Fire Plume. Moreover, Fire Plume didn't tell him about the drawbacks of the tyrannical Dao butchering art. However, Zhuowen didn't blame Fire Plume. After all, he didn't have a deep friendship with Fire Plume back then. Moreover, the tyrannical Dao butchering art had helped him a lot at that time. It was precisely because of the great limitations of the tyrannical Dao butchering art that he knew it would be very difficult to break through to the heavens mandate realm. If he wanted to break through to a higher realm, he would have to cultivate a higher level Dao art. However, the first step of Dao validation was very important for a cultivator. It was the time to lay the foundation. If the Dao art cultivated during this period was incomplete, it would be very difficult to change to another Dao art. It might even be impossible to cultivate it. This was why the tyrannical Dao butchering art was so powerful, but it was a street vendor in the Xian, Mi celestial domain. Most cultivators wouldn't choose to cultivate it. However, Zhuowen wasn't worried. His main body didn't have a Dao root, yet he had successfully validated his Dao. This was a miracle in itself. Although it was difficult to change to another Dao art, Zhuowen knew that it shouldn't be very difficult for him. After all, he didn't have a Tao root. When other people cultivated Tao arts, their Tao roots were fixed. Therefore, it would be very difficult for them to change to another Tao art. However, Zhuowen didn't have such a problem. Upon seeing Zhuowen shake his head, Fire Plume looked calm and continued, "You might not know this, but the origin of the tyrannical Tao butchering art is the tyrannical Tao sect. The tyrannical Tao sect was a legendary Tao palace level force a long time ago." Chapter 2790. Yu Xan. The Tao slaughtering peerless sect can only be considered an ordinary Tao palace level force. However, a heaven-defying prodigy appeared in this force. His name is Yu Xan. This Yu Xan is very talented, and his cultivation speed has increased by leaps and bounds. In just a few thousand years, he stepped into the third step of Tao validation and became a creator. Not only that, but after Yu Xan became a creator, his cultivation speed didn't slow down at all. He actually took another step forward and became a creator, shocking the entire Xianmi heavenly domain. At this point, Fire Plume's beautiful eyes revealed a look of excitement. Zhuowen was also shocked. Tao palaces did indeed have third step Tao validation cultivators overseeing them. However, according to what he knew, the third step Tao validation cultivators of Tao palaces were basically all creators. For example, Huang Wu of the Huangji aristocratic family was only an early stage creator. As for the master of the lightning god park, Lei Litian, he might be slightly stronger than Huang Wu, but he was only at the middle stage of the god of creation stage. As for the creator, he was even stronger than the creator, and his cultivation level was unfathomable. No matter how powerful a Tao Palace level force was, it was basically impossible for it to have a creator. Only a Tao Palace level force could nurture such a terrifying cultivator. Moreover, a powerhouse at the level of the Master of Creation was in existence that stood at the pinnacle of the entire Xianmi heavenly domain. With a flip of his hand, he could create clouds and rain with another. He could change the general direction and development of a Tao domain. This Yu Xian was indeed a prodigy. To be able to become a creator on his own in a Tao Palace level force, his talent was monstrous enough. Zhuowen also knew that Fire Plume suddenly mentioning this Yu Xan probably had something to do with the Tao slaughtering peerless technique. Otherwise, Fire Plume wouldn't mention this for no reason. The Tao slaughtering peerless sect Yu Xan created the Tao slaughtering peerless sect. Fire Plume said seriously. Zhuowen frowned slightly. He looked at Fire Plume and said, "Miss Fire Plume, did you mention this Yu Xan just to say that this Tao slaughtering peerless technique was created by him?" Fire Plume shook her head and said, "Of course not. Brother Zhua, my Purple Red House was also a Tao Palace level force in the past. The 9th sect master of my Purple Red House was also a prodigy of her generation. 10,000 years ago, she was Yu Xian's lover. After Yu Xan was besieged and killed back then, he left behind a brocade pouch for the sect master. It is said that the complete earth-slaughtering Tao tyrannical art is hidden inside. What I want to give you is that brocade pouch." Zhuowen was stunned, and then he felt disbelief as he replied with a question. "Miss Huiyu, since this brocade pouch belongs to your Purple Red House, why are you giving it to me? Don't you need the Tao slaughtering peerless technique?" Fire Plume smiled bitterly and said, "Of course we want it, but the brocade pouch contains an extremely powerful seal. It's said that this seal was placed by Yu Xan back then. Only Yu Xan and the 9th sect master know how to break it. Ever since Yu Xan was besieged and killed, the 9th sect master committed suicide. The method to break this brocade pouch has become an unsolved mystery. For 10,000 years, the successive sect masters of the Purple Red House have tried to break it, but all of them ended in failure. Brother Zhua, you're not an ordinary person. I'll give this to you. If you can open it, everything in this brocade pouch will belong to you. Even if you can't open it, it doesn't matter. You can keep it as a souvenir. Fire Plume took out a brocade pouch and handed it to Zhuowen. However, Fire Plume looked embarrassed. She had wanted to repay Zhuowen for saving her life, but now she had given Zhuowen another difficult problem. Zhuowen didn't mind. He took the brocade pouch and asked casually, "Miss Fire Plume, you said that Yu Exan was besieged and killed. Why was he besieged, and who was able to kill him?" Fire Plume sighed softly and said, "I heard that Yu Exan obtained some kind of supreme treasure. As for what kind of supreme treasure it is, I'm not too sure. It's said that this supreme treasure attracted the attention of Dao Palace forces. Of the 5 Dao Palace forces in the Eastern Dao domain, 3 of them joined forces and sent 5 Creation Realm experts to besiege Yu Exan. In the end, they paid a terrible price and killed Yu Exan. Speaking of which, this was the first time Dao Palace forces had joined forces to kill a cultivator." Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He was a little moved. He had some idea of how large Dao Palace forces were. At the very least, the Dao Palace was a colossus to him at the moment. It would be too easy for such a powerful force to crush him to death. Whatever Yu Exan had gotten his hands on was definitely something incredible. Otherwise, there was no way he would have attracted the combined efforts of Dao Palace-level entities. Zhuowen wasn't too interested in Yu Exan's old affairs. His gaze fell on the restrictions on the surface of the brocade pouch. However, he was stunned for a moment when he saw the restrictions on the brocade pouch. Then he almost laughed out loud. This was because he was all too familiar with the restrictions on the surface of the brocade pouch. Back in the Great Brahma domain, he had broken the restrictions on the Tower of Hanoi. The restrictions on the Tower of Hanoi were arranged according to a certain functional law. The restrictions on the brocade pouch just so happened to follow the same law. Zhuowen only glanced at them before he began to break the restrictions on the brocade pouch. When Fire Plume saw that Zhuowen couldn't wait to break the restrictions on the brocade pouch as soon as he received it, he couldn't help but be stunned. Then he secretly shook his head. He felt that Zhuowen was too impatient. At the same time, he also knew that once Zhuowen suffered, he would give up and completely lose interest. However, what happened next left Hua Yu completely dumbfounded. After Zhuowen fiddled with the brocade pouch for a while, he found that the opening of the brocade pouch had opened by itself. "This, Brother Zhua, you broke the restrictions on the brocade pouch?" Fire Plume stuttered. Zhuowen smiled and said it was just luck. After saying that, Zhuowen's divine sense entered the brocade pouch. Soon, he found that the brocade pouch contained 3 jade slips. He quickly opened the first jade slip and found that it recorded the complete version of the tyrannical Dao butchering technique. He knew that as long as he cultivated the complete version of the tyrannical Dao butchering technique, the strength of his main body would increase greatly. Then he opened the second jade slip. This second jade slip contained the lifetime worth of energy left behind by the 9th sect master of the Purple Red House. As long as a cultivator used this energy, they could ascend to the Heaven's Mandate realm in a short period of time without any side effects. This jade slip was clearly left behind by the 9th sect master for his successor. Zhuowen's eyes flashed as he handed the jade slip to Fire Plume. Fire Plume didn't understand what was going on until Zhuowen explained it to him. Fire Plume was pleasantly surprised, and he was even more grateful to Zhuowen. Zhuowen opened the third jade slip. His gaze immediately turned serious, and then it completely transformed into surprise. So Yu Exan was hunted down by a Dao Palace faction because of this. Chapter 2791. Ho Yi's divine Bao the third jade slip only mentioned one item, and Zhuowen was no stranger to it. It was called Ho Yi's divine Bao. Ho Yi's divine Bao was the personal weapon of great shaman Ho Yi. Although he was only a great shaman, his strength was on par with the 12 ancestral shamans in his time. Back then, Ho Yi stood at the very pinnacle of the great shamans in the Eldritch domain. He was revered and worshipped by countless great shamans. His strength was terrifying, and his most famous possession was the divine bow in his hand. The bow and arrow he'd forged himself were supreme treasures that had slain the legendary Golden Crow. Ho Yi's fame had soared after the Battle of the Golden Crow. His divine bow and arrow were named Ho Yi's divine bow and divine arrow. Zhuo had accidentally obtained Ho Yi's divine arrow and knew just how terrifying it was. The Ho Yi's divine bow, which came with Ho Yi's divine arrow, possessed unimaginable power. It was a true supreme treasure. Zhuo knew that Ho Yi's divine arrow was based on the bow, and its power was many times greater than that of Ho Yi's divine arrow. If the Ho Yi godly bow and Ho Yi godly arrow were combined, the power would be even more terrifying. Yu Exan had obtained Ho Yi's divine bow by accident, and that was why he'd been coveted by the Dao Palace. He'd been besieged and killed in the end. However, Yu Exan had known that he wouldn't be able to escape this calamity, so he'd hidden the bow in a secret place. He'd placed all the clues about Ho Yi's divine bow in a brocade pouch and secretly handed it to the 9th sect master of the Purple House. The 9th sect master hadn't paid much attention to the pouch, and when he learned of Yu Exan's death, he'd committed suicide. The brocade pouch had remained in the Purple House, but the restrictions on its surface were too powerful. None of the successive sect masters of the Purple House had been able to break through them. Since the brocade pouch was related to Yu Exan, the Purple House didn't dare reveal it to the outside world. They didn't want to invite disaster upon themselves. Fire Plume saw that after Zhuo looked at the last jade slip, his face was first pleasantly surprised, and then he revealed a dignified expression. He knew that the contents of this jade slip were definitely extraordinary. However, Fire Plume was smart and didn't ask any questions. This brocade pouch was originally something she wanted to give to Zhuo. In theory, it already belonged to Zhuo. Moreover, after Zhuo opened the restriction, he also gave her one of the jade slips. She was already very grateful. Naturally, she wouldn't ask anything that she shouldn't ask. Zhuo was quite satisfied that Fire Plume didn't ask any more questions. Although the Ho Yi divine bow was a supreme treasure, it was also a hot potato. Even Violet Red Chamber, a Dao Palace, might not be able to protect the bow, let alone the current state of decline. Zhuo and Fire Plume exchanged a few more pleasantries before bidding each other farewell. Fire Plume was anxious to cultivate. She had obtained the 9th sect master's cultivation jade slip, which was enough for her to become a Heaven's Will Master in a short time. As long as she could become a Heaven's Will Master, she would be able to completely stabilize the Violet Red Chamber, which was still in turmoil. Zhuo, on the other hand, was anxious to find clues about the Ho Yi divine bow. At the same time, he also wanted to cultivate the complete version of the tyrannical Dao slaughtering technique to increase his strength. As soon as he returned to his room, Zhuo laid down enough restrictions in the room before taking out Yu Exan's jade slip. At that time, he only gave it a cursory glance. He knew that the contents of the jade slip were related to the Ho Yi divine bow, but he didn't take a closer look at the specifics. After opening the jade slip, Zhuo carefully studied it. It took him half a day to finish reading the contents of the jade slip. His face was filled with both joy and worry. Yu Exan's luck was truly heaven-defying. It was said that when he was young, he had accidentally found the Ho Yi divine bow. Because the Ho Yi divine bow was so ordinary that it was no different from an ordinary wooden bow, no one had paid attention to it after Yu Exan embarked on the path of cultivation. But later, as Yu Exan rose to power, the Ho Yi divine bow gradually revealed its sharpness and became more and more heaven-defying. Finally, it attracted the attention of a Dao Palace faction. In the end, they recognized the bow as the Ho Yi divine bow. In the end, 3 of the 5 Dao Palace factions joined forces. They were the Sanchasur Temple, the 10 Extremities Corp sect, and the Fallen Star Mountain. Of course, the order to attack wasn't given by the sect masters of the 3 Dao Palace factions. Instead, it was the 5 masters of creation from the 3 Tao Palace factions who wanted to steal the Hou-Yi divine bow. Of course, although the sect masters of the 3 factions didn't say anything, they didn't stop the 5 masters of creation either. It was clear that they had tacitly agreed to it, and at the end of the jade slip, it was said that there was a map of the route. Zhuowen knew that this map was probably drawn by Yu Exan himself and was used to hide the Hou-Yi divine bow. Zhuowen didn't immediately head to the end of the map. Although he knew that the Hou-Yi divine bow was hidden at the end, he didn't dare to be careless. The fact that Yu Exan had hidden the Hou-Yi divine bow in advance showed that he was a cautious person. He wasn't a rash person who would place all his hopes on the jade slip recorded by Yu Exan. In the next half a month, Zhuowen studied the tyrannical Tao slaughtering technique continuously. Originally, the tyrannical Tao slaughtering technique he had mastered was incomplete. It only had the first 3 moves, which were the slaughtering Tao finger, the slaughtering Tao palm, and the slaughtering Tao hand. Now that he had learned the complete version of the tyrannical Tao slaughtering technique, he realized that the tyrannical Tao slaughtering technique wasn't limited to the palm. Instead, every part of the body could be used as a powerful weapon. Furthermore, this Tao technique was extremely domineering. Even in the entire host region, it was considered an extremely high-level Tao technique. After Zhuowen learned the tyrannical Tao slaughtering technique, he felt even more admiration for Yu Exan, who had never seen his face before. After all, Yu Exan was able to create such a powerful Tao technique, which showed how terrifying Yu Exan's talent was. However, because Yu Exan had only cultivated to the Lord Creation Realm back then, the tyrannical Tao slaughtering technique could only be cultivated to the Lord Creation Realm. After Zhuowen's cultivation reached the Lord Creation Realm, Zhuowen would have to create his own Tao technique or change to a higher level Tao technique. Generally, after cultivating to the Lord Creation Realm, even Zhuowen couldn't easily change to other Tao techniques. This meant that he would have to cultivate from scratch. Zhuowen's realm wasn't high now, so it wasn't too late to change to other Tao techniques. However, once he reached the Lord Creation Realm, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Of course, the tyrannical Tao slaughtering technique was enough for Zhuowen. After all, the tyrannical Tao butchering technique was a creation-level Tao technique. Even Tao Palace level factions did not have a Tao technique of this level. Only Tao Palace level factions had such a creation-level Tao technique. Chapter 2792. Ascending to Primordial Chaos Master after half a month, Zhuowen finally grasped the basic level of the tyrannical Tao slaughtering technique. Zhuowen's understanding of the Tao was also much higher than before. Now that Zhuowen's main body had gained a lot of inspiration from the tyrannical Tao slaughtering technique, he could break through at any time if he wanted. Zhuowen waved his sleeve and took out many heavenly Tao origin crystals from the outside world. Most of them were special grade heavenly Tao origin crystals. He emptied the entire treasury of the Huangji clan. The outside world was extremely rich in resources, so there were many special grade heavenly Tao origin crystals. Although the amount of heavenly Tao origin crystals required for his main body to break through was terrifying, the reserves he had were enough for him to break through to Primordial Chaos Master. After taking out a large number of special class heavenly law origin crystals, Zhuowen frantically absorbed the energy of the scattered special class heavenly law origin crystals. For a moment, a terrifying energy storm filled Zhuowen's surroundings. It swept out and even affected the large formation that Zhuowen had set up around him, causing it to tremble as if it would collapse at any time. Rumble! Suddenly, a muffled sound like thunder rang out. The formation restriction around him was completely torn apart. Then the room Zhuowen was in collapsed. A terrifying energy pillar shot into the sky. Dark clouds covered the 9 heavens and spun wildly. Many cultivators of the purple-red house were alarmed. They came out one after another and stared blankly at the scene. How terrifying! Did someone break through to the second step of Tao validation? It actually caused such a terrifying phenomenon. Many cultivators discussed animatedly. Their eyes were filled with surprise as they guessed who was about to break through to the second step of Tao validation. Tang Chimei stood in the middle of this group of people. She looked in that direction, her beautiful eyes extremely complicated. She knew that the person breaking through was Zhuowen. As far as she knew, Zhuowen was only a Tao origin master. Now that Zhuowen had broken through, he was only a primordial chaos master. However, Zhuowen's breakthrough to primordial chaos master was already so terrifying. Even Tang Chimei didn't expect such a scene to surpass the scene of ordinary cultivators at the second step of Tao validation. Brother Zhuo is really a freak. Just breaking through to primordial chaos master already has such a terrifying momentum. If he becomes a destiny master, won't he be heaven-defying? Not far away, Fire Plume stood in a fiery red dress. Her beautiful eyes also looked at Zhuowen's breakthrough with a complicated expression. Standing beside Huo Yu was Steel Feather. Steel Feather's face was also filled with emotions. Huo Yu's appearance attracted the attention of the other disciples of the Purple Red House. Many of them stepped forward to greet her. Most of them found that Fire Plume's cultivation had broken through to Primordial Chaos Master, and the respect in their eyes became even stronger. After half an incense stick's worth of time, the terrifying energy column finally dissipated. A figure rushed over and landed in front of Fire Plume. Zhuowen looked Fire Plume up and down and nodded. Miss Fire Plume, congratulations on breaking through to Primordial Chaos Master. You'll be a Destiny Master in a month. Fire Plume smiled sweetly and said, Fire Plume is all thanks to you, Brother Zhuo. If it weren't for you, Brother Zhuo, Fire Plume would just be a mediocre person. Zhuowen smiled faintly and didn't stand on ceremony. Fire Plume's cultivation was only at the early stage of Primordial Tao Master, which was even lower than his Primordial Chaos Master. If he hadn't given Fire Plume the jade slip containing the cultivation of the 9th Sect Master, Fire Plume wouldn't have broken through to Primordial Chaos Master in just half a month. I need to go out for a while. After that, I'll go directly to the Thunder God Garden to participate in the Pill Rhythm Grand Assembly. You don't need to wait for me. Zhuowen said to Fire Plume. The Pill Rhythm Grand Assembly was a grand event in the host territory. Although Purple Red House was only a Tao sect and didn't have the qualifications to participate in it, they could still visit it. This time, Fire Plume planned to bring Tang Chimei, Steel Plume, and the others to the Pill Rhythm Grand Assembly to broaden their horizons. Fire Plume was startled. She nodded and didn't ask why Zhuowen was going out. After bidding farewell to Fire Plume, Tang Chimei, and the others, Zhuowen simply left Purple Red House. 5 days later, Zhuowen appeared in the starry sky, which was hundreds of millions of kilometers away from the Thunder God Garden. There was nothing in this starry sky except for a black mountain suspended in the starry sky. Not a single blade of grass grew on this black mountain, and it was lifeless. Zhuowen checked the map in the jade slip and found that the destination of the map was this inconspicuous black mountain. With doubts in his heart, he landed on the black mountain. Zhuowen scanned the area with his divine sense, but didn't find anything of value in the black mountain. The only thing he found was a valley in the middle of the black mountain. In that valley there was a small cave. This cave was very narrow and could only accommodate one person. Zhuowen pondered for a moment and then entered the cave. He walked inside for half a day without finding anything. Just as he was about to go out, a terrifying suction force suddenly came from the depths of the cave. Zhuowen didn't pay attention and was pulled into the depths of the cave by the suction force. Bang! 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 As Zhuowen was pulled in by the suction force, a terrifying murderous intent shrouded Zhuowen's body. Wind blades, which looked like real objects, swept over from all directions and attacked Zhuowen's vital points. Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy. Under the tearing force of the suction force, he couldn't move much and couldn't avoid the wind blades around him. Therefore, he could only use his physical body to resist the suction force. At the same time, he used the profound creation light to protect his surroundings, hoping to block the whistling wind blades around him. What made Zhuowen's pupils shrink was that the profound creation light could only block the wind blades for a quarter of an hour before it was torn to pieces by the wind blades. Then, more wind blades flew towards Zhuowen's body. In an instant, Zhuowen's body was torn into a bloody mist. However, after Zhuowen's body was torn to pieces, he instantly reformed his body. However, Zhuowen's face was slightly pale. Puff! Unfortunately, less than a quarter of an hour after Zhuowen's body reformed, another wave of wind blades swept over. Zhuowen could only helplessly watch his body being torn to pieces again. This repeated more than 10 times. Zhuowen was almost numb. Finally, he fell to the ground, and the wind blades finally disappeared. Zhuowen struggled to get up and found that he was in a large stone room. At the same time, he was still in a state of shock. The wind blades at the entrance were simply too terrifying. He was certain that even a god of creation would have to pay a hefty price to block those wind blades. There was even a chance that they might die. Chapter 2793. 1,000 years of life. This Yuexan is really ruthless. He was clearly luring others here, but he actually set up such a terrifying trap. If I didn't have the Pangu's sacred body and powerful self-healing ability, I wouldn't have been able to pass through the entrance alone. Zhuowen had a lingering fear in his heart, and there was some resentment in his heart. This Yuexan had clearly written the clues on the jade slip, yet he actually didn't mention that there was such a trap here. If it wasn't for Zhuowen being strong enough, then he would really have died here. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the stone room and found that it was very spacious, but the furnishings were very simple. In this stone room, besides a stone table and 4 stone stools, there was a golden futon behind the stone table and a pitch-black skeleton sitting on the futon. Zhuowen landed not far from the skeleton and frowned slightly. He didn't easily approach it. This was because he found that the surface of the skeleton was surrounded by black gas. This black gas was poisonous, and its toxicity was something that Zhuowen was very afraid of. The jade slip said that the Hou-Yi divine Bao is hidden inside this skeleton. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the skeleton, and his brows inadvertently knitted. The poison on the skeleton was very strong. If the Hou-Yi divine Bao was really inside, he would probably have to test the poison on himself. Moreover, Zhuowen used his divine sense to scan the skeleton. Indeed, he found an ordinary-looking wooden Bao inside the skeleton. Zhuowen didn't directly approach the skeleton. Instead, he sat to the side, took out the emperor pill furnace, and began to refine the detoxification pills. He spent half a day refining more than a dozen detoxification pills, all of which were heavenly fate pills. Zhuowen put a detoxification pill in his mouth in advance, approached the skeleton, and suddenly punched out. Crack! The skeleton directly shattered, and then the wooden Bao inside was revealed. Zhuowen took out the wooden Bao, but at the same time the black gas was like a maggot that suddenly invaded his right arm, invading his entire body. Zhuowen didn't hesitate to take out the detoxification pills that he had already refined and swallowed them one by one to resist the poisonous gas invading his body. At the same time, he also used the Pangu's sacred body to completely force the poisonous gas out. It had to be said that the poisonous gas was very difficult to deal with. Zhuowen spent 3 days and 3 nights to finally force the poisonous gas out. He was so tired that he was covered in cold sweat and almost exhausted. What a terrifying poisonous gas! Zhuowen sighed softly and muttered to himself. But soon, his face became extremely ugly. Unknowingly, a black vertical bar had appeared between Zhuowen's eyebrows. This black strip contained a terrifying poisonous gas. Zhuo Wen also discovered that along with the appearance of this black strip, a faint poisonous gas had appeared in his meridians at some unknown time. Because it was very faint, Zhuo Wen had not noticed it at all. Zhuo Wen did not expect that he would still be poisoned in the end. Furthermore, the poison did not seem to immediately threaten his life. Fated One, congratulations on obtaining the Ho-E Godly Bow. I presume you're aware of its origins from the jade slip I gave you. Suddenly, a solemn voice sounded in the stone room. Zhuo Wen knew that the owner of the voice was Yu Xian. Yu Xian was already dead. This should be the will that Yu Xian left behind before he died. You were able to activate my sound restriction. Obviously, you passed through the wind blades at the entrance and came here. You are lucky to have obtained my jade slip. But in addition to that, you also need to have enough strength. If you are lucky but not strong, I will not give you the Ho-E Divine Bow. You are lucky and strong. You are qualified to obtain the Ho-E Divine Bow. The voice continued to speak. Zhuo Wen secretly cursed this person for being cunning and insidious. The wind blades at the entrance were indeed deliberately set up by this guy. My name is Yu Xian. I am from the Tao Hegemony sect. I rose because of the Ho-E Divine Bow, but I also fell because of it. You have obtained the Ho-E Divine Bow, but it also means that you have been poisoned by my Millennium Lethal Poison. This poison is no ordinary poison. It is a kind of oath poison that is restricted by the Heavenly Tao. This poison is not without an antidote. The antidote is to complete my oath within 1,000 years. As for my oath, it is very simple. You have to help me kill the cultivator who tried to kill me back then. You have to do it within 1,000 years. After 1,000 years, you will die without a doubt. When Yu Xian said this, his voice gradually faded away. But Zhuo Wen's expression was extremely ugly. He hadn't expected Yu Xian to have such a trump card. Although he had obtained the Ho-E Divine Bow, he had also inexplicably shouldered Yu Xian's hatred. He had tried this poison several times and deeply understood how difficult it was to deal with. With his current level, it was basically impossible to cure this poison. However, Yu Xian hadn't lied to him. This poison was no ordinary poison. He could sense the aura of the Heavenly Tao within it. It seemed to have many connections with the Heavenly Tao. At the same time, the scene of the battle between Yu Xian and the 5 Masters of Creation appeared in Zhuo Wen's mind. Zhuo Wen knew that this scene was most likely caused by the 1,000-year life-sizer that Yu Xian had placed in his body. The appearances and auras of these 5 people were completely displayed before his eyes. It had to be said that Yu Xian's strength was indeed terrifying. He was only at a disadvantage when fighting 1 against 5. He hadn't been defeated. However, in the end, the 5 people had joined forces and burned their essence, blood, at the same time. They had used a desperate move to kill Yu Xian in the end. Of course, before Yu Xian died, he launched an attack that would injure both sides. He blasted towards 2 of the 5 people, directly killing them. In other words, if Zhuo Wen wanted to cure the poison, he had to kill the remaining 3 people. At this moment, the information of these 3 people appeared in Zhuo Wen's mind in full detail. Ba Jingwei of the 10 Extremes Yin Corp sect, Sha Wenhan of the Fallen Star Mountain, and Li Hongyang of the Sun-Chasing Temple. Zhuo Wen secretly recited the information of the 3 people that appeared in his mind, but the corners of his mouth revealed a bitter smile. He didn't know any of these 3 people, but he knew that they were not ordinary people. They were all masters of creation. Furthermore, all 3 of them were backed by Tao Palace forces. Asking him to take the initiative to kill all 3 of them was tantamount to asking him to throw his life away. Moreover, the 1,000 years that Yu Xian had given him was actually very short. After all, 1,000 years passed in the blink of an eye for a cultivator. Moreover, Zhuo Wen wasn't confident that he could advance his cultivation to the 3rd step of Tao validation in such a short period of time. However, it was possible for his Pangu's sacred body to reach the 7-star level, but this required a lot of luck. He would be able to obtain other ancestral, wizard, venomous insects later on. Otherwise, the advancement of his Pangu sacred body would be too slow. Even the special grade, Heavenly Tao Origin Crystal, was not that useful for the Pangu's sacred body. This Ho-E Divine Bao is so troublesome. Zhuowen sighed softly. Looking at the Ho-E Divine Bao in his hand, his eyes were no longer as excited as before. The Ho-E Divine Bao was indeed powerful and would be of great help to him. But he would have to provoke the higher-ups of 3 Tao Palace forces because of it. The gains didn't make up for the losses. Forget it. I'll take one step at a time. Zhuowen sighed softly, put away the Ho-E Divine Bao, and left the stone room. Chapter 2794. Dragon Vane Zhuowen did not return the way he had come. The wind blade array at the entrance had left a deep impression on him. Once he entered that array, he would most likely die. He did not want to experience the pain of his body being cut apart and reborn again. That feeling was simply too unbearable. Therefore, after leaving the stone room, he headed in the opposite direction of the wind blade array. He knew that Uxian was a creation, Lord Expert. Since this was where he had passed away, it was impossible that he had only left behind the Ho-E Divine Bao. In front of him was a deep tunnel with steep rock walls on both sides. Zhuowen continued forward along the tunnel and soon heard the sound of water. He increased his speed and soon reached the end of the tunnel. What appeared in front of Zhuowen was an enormous mineral vein. In the center of this mineral vein was a huge cliff. Above the cliff, a golden stream of water poured down. The sound of water that Zhuowen had heard just now was the sound of the stream of water crashing against the rock. Above the cliff was an enormous dragon head. Looking carefully behind the dragon head was a long, winding dragon body. Above the cliff was a huge dragon. Of course, this was not a real dragon, but a rock in the shape of a dragon. The position of the dragon head was the source of the water flow. This is a dragon vein. Zhuowen's eyes lit up with pleasant surprise. The so-called dragon vein was an earth vein that contained an enormous amount of heavenly Tao energy. This level of earth vein was even higher than a special grade heavenly Tao origin crystal mine. It was an extremely precious earth vein. The energy level of this dragon vein was naturally higher than that of a special grade heavenly Tao origin crystal mine. It was more effective for a cultivator's cultivation. The Black Mountain where Uxian had passed away was indeed extraordinary. From the outside, it looked like an abandoned mountain range. But only by entering the Black Mountain and carefully examining it could one discover the dragon vein hidden in the deepest part of the mountain. Without any hesitation, Zhuowen leaped into the golden pool. The water in the golden pool contained the essence of the dragon vein. He naturally could not waste it. Moreover, Zhuowen's original body and clone cultivated separately, absorbing the energy of the pool separately. Regardless of whether it was the original body or the avatar, the speed at which they absorbed energy was extremely terrifying. The moment Zhuowen entered the pool, the originally calm water began to churn like raging waves, creating huge waves that were dozens of meters tall. Time flew by. Soon, more than a month had passed. Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes. His true body leaped out, and his aura was as vast as the sea. He had just advanced to Primordial Chaos Master, and after absorbing the energy of the dragon vein for more than a month, his cultivation had advanced to the peak of Primordial Chaos Master. If it weren't for the fact that Zhuowen had just become a Primordial Chaos Lord and his realm hadn't stabilized, Zhuowen's original body could have relied on the energy of the dragon vein to become a half-step Heaven's Mandate Lord in one fell swoop. If he was lucky, he could have even reached the second step Tao Vindication. However, Zhuowen also knew that this was just a thought in his mind. As for the avatar, it was simply a glutton. In more than a month, nearly half of the energy of the dragon vein had been absorbed by the avatar. Although it had absorbed so much of the dragon vein, The Avatar's Pangu sacred body had only reached the peak of the 4-star level from the early stage. As for the Pangu sacred body's advancement to the 5-star level, it was unlikely to succeed even if it absorbed the entire dragon vein. This was not a problem of insufficient energy, but a problem of the quality of the energy. No matter how much energy the dragon vein had, the Pangu's sacred body couldn't advance smoothly. Ever since Zhuowen's Pangu sacred body had advanced to the 3-star level, he had realized that if he wanted to continue to advance, he had to integrate other ancestral sorcery, venomous insects. The essence of the Pangu's sacred body was that it could only be successfully cultivated with the flesh and blood of the 12 ancestral sorcery, venomous insects. Otherwise, no matter how much energy it had, it would be useless. The Avatar stood up, took a step forward, and merged into the body of the original body. Although there was still some energy in the dragon vein, he knew that even if he continued to absorb it, it would be difficult for him to make much progress. Furthermore, he had received a message from Lei Zixuan today, saying that the Lightning God Gardens team was about to set off. Furthermore, Lei Zixuan had also given Zhuo a location in the message, telling him to head to the location that Lei Zixuan had given him. Zhuo looked at the location that Lei Zixuan gave him, and his brows furrowed slightly. He discovered that the location that Lei Zixuan gave him wasn't near the transfer array of the Lightning God Garden. Instead, it was in another part of the Lightning God Garden. Zhuo had not stayed in the Thunder God Garden for a long time, so he was not familiar with this location. However, since it was still in the Thunder God Garden, Zhuo did not think too much about it. Zhuo casually replied a message and left the Black Mountain. However, before he left, Zhuo put the entire Black Mountain into his macro world. The Black Mountain contained the dragon vein, and although he had absorbed more than half of it, the remaining energy was still extremely terrifying. Now, Zhuo had found the Hou-Yi Divine Bow, and judging from the amount of energy consumed by the Hou-Yi Divine Arrow, the Hou-Yi Divine Bow would consume an even more terrifying amount of energy. Therefore, Zhuo would not waste any of it. After putting away the Black Mountain, Zhuo took out the space-time roulette and left. This time, Zhuo was rushing with all his might, so after a few hours he returned to the Purple Red House's base. When he arrived, he found that Fire Plume, Tong Chimei, and the others had already set off. He did not chat with them and entered the teleportation formation of the Purple Red House, teleporting to the Thunder God Garden. After walking out of the teleportation formation, Zhuo found that the area around the teleportation formation of the Thunder God Garden was quite deserted. There were many teleportation formations in the Thunder God Garden, and the teleportation formation that Zhuo used was used to teleport between the Thunder God Garden and its subordinate forces. Although it was more deserted than usual, Zhuo did not mind. Soon, Zhuo arrived at the place where Lei Zixuan had agreed to meet him. He found that he was at the southeastern corner of the Thunder God Garden, and there were a series of mountains here. Lightning flashed between the mountains, and electric snakes danced in the air, making them look like towering thunder mountains. Just by looking at them, one could feel that they were extremely terrifying. Zhuo furrowed his brows. He did not expect that Lei Zixuan would ask him to come to such a remote place. Could it be that this was the starting point of the Thunder God Garden's trip to the Pill Tempering Conference? Brother Zhuo, you are late. All of a sudden, a charming voice came from not far away. Zhuo looked over and saw Lei Zixuan slowly flying over. Today, Lei Zixuan was dressed in red, and the heroic spirit between her brows seemed much gentler. She even revealed a trace of charm, as if she was a beauty that could charm the world. Zhuo revealed a surprised expression, and he cupped his fists and said to Lei Zixuan, "Miss Lei, is this the starting point of the Pill Tempering Conference?" Chapter 2795. Thunder Godship. Don't we need to use a transportation array to get to the Pill Array Immortal Alliance? Why go through the trouble of using a flying ship? Zhuo asked curiously as he followed behind. Lei Zixuan smiled and said, "Brother Zhuo, you don't know this, but but the Pale Array Immortal Alliance is the holy land of Pale Array Masters. It has a special status in the Xianmi heavenly region. There are no transportation arrays in the Pale Array Immortal Alliance's territory. If you want to enter the Pale Array Immortal Alliance's territory, you have to use your own flying divine equipment. Hearing this, Zhuowen was speechless. The Pale Array Immortal Alliance was really weird. It was so convenient to use a transportation array, but they didn't use it. Instead, they let others use a flying ship. Along the way, Lei Zishuan kept looking for topics to talk about, while Zhuowen chatted casually. Very quickly, the two of them crossed the Thunder Mountain and walked out of the boundary of the Thunder God Park, arriving at the outer space. In the distant space, there was an incomparably huge flying ship docked in the starry space. The flying ship was packed with people, and it was extremely lively. Brother Zhua, this is the flying ship that our Thunder God Park has prepared. It's called the Thunder God Ship. Don't look down on its size. Its speed is not sloppy at all. Lei Zishuan pointed at the incomparably huge flying ship in front of them and said proudly. Zhuowen nodded, and under Lei Zishuan's guidance, he entered the deck of the flying ship. The moment Zhuowen entered the deck, a dignified, middle-aged man with a vast aura brought a group of people to Zhuowen. "Haha, I think this little brother must be Zhuowen. Little brother Zhua is really young and promising. It is a blessing for Thunder God Park that little brother Zhua is able to become a guest alchemist of our Thunder God Park." The middle-aged man laughed. Zhuowen cupped his fists towards the middle-aged man to express his gratitude. At the same time, he guessed that this person should be the owner of the Thunder God Park, Lei Litian. Even though Lei Litian spoke so enthusiastically, Zhuowen could feel the disapproval in his expression. Moreover, the 7 people standing behind Lei Litian should all be Pill Masters. From the logo on these Pill Masters' robes, one could see that they were basically all profound grade Pill Masters, and one of them was even an eternal grade Pill Master. When Lei Litian was welcoming Zhuowen, the 7 of them merely cast a sidelong glance at Zhuowen. When they discovered that Zhuowen was ordinary, the disdain in their eyes was extremely obvious. Zhuowen did not deliberately reveal his identity as an alchemist, so these 7 people could not discern just how good Zhuowen's alchemy skills were. However, Zhuowen did not seem to have anything special about him. These 7 alchemy masters were naturally extremely disdainful of him. In their hearts, they thought that it was a waste for Lei Litian to give one of the spots to participate in the Pill Grand Assembly to this child. 7 alchemy masters, this is Pill Master Zhua. Although he is only a primordial grade Pill Master, he is not an ordinary person. I hope that everyone can get along well during this journey. Lei Zishuan smiled at the 7 alchemy masters and introduced Zhuowen to them. "Owner Lei, it's not that I oppose you, but the Pill Masters participating in the Pill Grand Assembly are basically all Pill Masters in the 2nd step of Tao validation or above. This child is only a primordial grade Pill Master. What qualifications does he have to participate in the Pill Grand Assembly? To put it bluntly, this kid doesn't even have the qualifications to be cannon fodder when he participates in the Pill Grand Assembly." The eternal grade Pill Master was an old man with white hair and beard. His eyes were wide open, giving off a fierce feeling. At this moment, he cast a sidelong glance at Zhuowen and cupped his hands towards Lei Litian. "He, Pill Master Lin, the younger generation still needs to experience. Pill Master Zhua is not an ordinary person. I have my eyes on him, so giving him a spot is nothing. After all, my Thunder God Park cannot find a better Pill Master this time. Moreover, with Pill Master Lin, my Thunder God Park has a great chance of winning this time. So what if we add one more person?" Lei Litian's words were watertight. Pill Master Lin was very pleased to hear them. He cupped his hands towards Lei Litian and said, "Owner Lei's words are reasonable. However, this child's qualifications are too shallow. It's best that he doesn't stay in the same first-class cabin as us. Otherwise, He will disturb my meditation." Lei Litian nodded indifferently. Then he looked at Zhuowen and said with a smile, "Little brother Zhua, Pill Master Lin is the main force of this Pill Grand Assembly. This is related to the reputation of Thunder God Park. We can only wrong you this time." Zhuowen looked at the expression on Lei Litian's face. He knew that Lei Litian did not care about his feelings at all. However, he did not care. It was enough for him to participate in this Pill Grand Assembly. Moreover, his level of Pill Dao was not high. It was normal for Lei Litian to look down on him. Perhaps, in the eyes of Lei Litian and the others, Zhuowen was only going to participate in the Pill Grand Assembly. However, Zhuowen did not think so. His Pill Dao was basically learned from the mysterious alchemy book. Moreover, he had mastered powerful alchemy arts. Therefore, his level of alchemy far surpassed other pill masters of the same level. Now he was a Heaven's Mandate Pill Master. However, his level of alchemy far surpassed all other Heaven's Mandate Pill Masters. Even a profound grade Pill Master was not enough to look at in front of him. With alchemy arts, he might even be able to refine eternal grade divine pills. Zhuowen naturally would not say these things. When the Pill Grand Assembly began, he would go all out. Naturally, he would let Thunder God Park know that his level of alchemy was extraordinary. Seeing Zhuowen being so tactful, the eyes of Pill Master Lin and the other 7 Pill Masters became even more disdainful. They thought that Zhuowen was just a person who bullied the weak and feared the strong. Of course, Lei Litian did not say anything about Zhuowen causing havoc in the Huangji clan. Therefore, the 7 Pill Masters did not know. If the 7 of them knew about it, even if Zhuowen's level of alchemy was lower than theirs, they would not have dared to look down on him. After Lei Litian sent the 7 Pill Masters away, Zhuowen looked at Lei Zixuan and asked, "Miss Lei, are Fire Plume and the others from the Purple Red House also on this flying ship?" Lei Zixuan nodded slightly and said, "Yes, this is their room number. I see that you are familiar with them. Why don't I arrange your room next to theirs? This is the room number. I still have some matters to attend to, so I will take my leave first." Lei Zixuan handed the room number to Zhuowen and left. Her attitude was even colder and more impatient than before. Zhuowen looked at Lei Zixuan's back and frowned. Lei Zixuan's attitude had changed a lot, which made Zhuowen feel a little strange. However, he did not take it to heart. He did not have much of a relationship with the Thunder God's garden, so there was no need for them to treat him like an ordinary person. Zhuowen took the room number and walked down the cabin. However, when he found his room, he could not help but frown. He walked down from the top and roughly knew the arrangement of the flying ship's cabins. This flying ship had a total of 4 levels. From top to bottom, the levels decreased. The highest level of the flying ship was the first-class cabin. It was the most luxurious cabin on the flying ship. It was said that only the higher-ups of the Thunder God's Garden and the 7 Pill Masters had the qualifications to stay there. Next was the upper-class cabin, the middle-class cabin, and the lower-class cabin. Among these 3 cabins, the lower-class cabin was the worst. The room that Lei Zixuan gave him was the lower-class cabin. After opening the door, Zhuowen found that the lower-class cabin's environment was so bad that he was speechless. Chapter 2796. The arrival of Huang Wu, Brother Zhua. Why are you in the lower-class cabin? Suddenly, a voice called out to Zhuowen. Zhuowen turned around and saw a red-clothed woman walk out of the room. This woman was Fire Plume from the Purple Red House. "My room is right across from yours." Zhuowen pointed at the room he was in and smiled faintly. "What? You are one of the alchemists participating in the pill competition. Why are you in the lower-class cabin? As far as I know, the other alchemists who are participating in the Pill Tempering Grand Assembly are staying in the first-class cabin. So they should have arranged a top-class cabin for you, even if there isn't a seat in the first-class cabin." Hua Yu's long and shapely eyebrows knitted as she spoke in a displeased manner. Zhuowen shook his head and said indifferently, "Accommodations don't affect me too much. Since I'm already here, I might as well take things as they come. There's some things that I don't need to be too calculative about." Fire Plume could only drop the matter when she heard Zhuowen's words. She then pulled Zhuowen and knocked on Tong Chimei and Steel Plume's room. Tong Chimei and Steel Plume were not far from the room next door. Zhuowen and Fire Plume chatted for a while before the flying ship suddenly shook. They felt as if they were floating in the air. They knew that the flying ship had started moving. Zhuowen extended his divine sense outside and found that he couldn't find any traces of the flying ship. He was a little surprised by the flying ship's speed. He had to admit that the flying ship's speed was even faster than the space-time roulette. It had reached the point where it could surpass space-time. However, he knew that although the flying ship was fast, it wasn't very agile. Moreover, it was very complicated to operate. The destination had to be set in advance before it could set off. It couldn't be changed midway. The flying ship could be used to travel, but it couldn't be used to chase people. Zhuowen chatted with Fire Plume and the others for a while before returning to his room. Lei Zixuan had said that with the flying ship's speed, they could reach the Pale Array Immortal Alliance's territory in 5 days. 5 days passed in the blink of an eye for Zhuowen, quickly passing by. 3 days later, the spaceship suddenly trembled violently and then quickly stopped. The cultivators in the cabin were awakened. They quickly left their rooms and went to the deck. Zhuowen was no exception. He brought Fire Plume and Tong Chimei to the deck. At this moment, there was another spaceship in front of the spaceship. This spaceship was slightly smaller than the Thunder God battleship. Its entire body was golden and dazzling, looking extremely luxurious. The moment Zhuowen saw the golden spaceship, his eyes narrowed. This was because he saw a few familiar faces on the golden flying ship. Among them, Huang Wu and Huang Shan from the Huangji family were present. He knew that this golden flying ship should be the Huangji aristocratic family's flying ship. At this moment, the Huangji aristocratic family's flying ship was blocking the Thunder God's flying ship. "This is the Huangji family's flying ship." Fire Plume's beautiful eyes narrowed. She couldn't help but lean towards Zhuowen. "Fire Plume, Chimei, and Steel Plume, if the 3 of you trust me, don't resist. I'll put you into my great world. How about it?" Zhuowen took a deep breath. He felt that something was wrong, so he transmitted his voice to Fire Plume and the other 2. Fire Plume and the other 2 looked at Zhuowen and nodded heavily. Although Huang Wu might be targeting Zhuowen, he obviously wouldn't let them go. Now, they could only rely on Zhuowen. After Zhuowen quietly put Fire Plume and the other 2 into his great world, he quietly retreated and hid in a remote corner. He secretly observed Huang Wu, Huang Shan, and the others. At this moment, Huang Wu, Huang Shan, and the others had already arrived on the deck of the Thunder God battleship. Lei Litian naturally went forward to welcome them with a face full of smiles. "Brother Huang, what a coincidence to meet you here." Lei Litian said with a smile. Huang Wu cupped his fists and said with a fake smile, "Brother Lei, do you think my eternal pills are so easy to take? Fire Plume and Steel Plume are the people I want, but you went back on your word and didn't even give me the eternal pills. Even if we weren't going the same way, you would have met me." Lei Litian didn't feel embarrassed at all. He still smiled faintly and said, "Brother Huang, did you come here today to ask for them?" "Humph. I went to Purple Red Cottage before, but Fire Plume and Steel Plume weren't there. I knew they must be on the Thunder God battleship. Brother Lei, why do you think I'm chasing after your Thunder God battleship?" Huang Wu said coldly. Lei Litian's smile faded. He quietly transmitted his voice. "Brother Huang, if you want those 2, why don't I give them to you? However, you might find a pleasant surprise. If you pay a certain price, I'll leave Zhuowen to you." Hearing Lei Litian's words, Huang Wu's pupils shrank. He immediately forced himself to calm down and replied, Brother Lei, are you serious? Zhuowen is on your thunder god battleship? Lei Litian still smiled and transmitted his voice. If Brother Huang doesn't believe me, you can check with your divine sense. As soon as Lei Litian finished speaking, Huang Wu's divine sense spread out like a tide and instantly enveloped the entire deck of the Thunder God battleship. At the same time, his aura of an early-stage Genesis Lord erupted and crushed the deck of the Thunder God battleship. The moment Huang Wu's divine sense fell on Zhuowen, Zhuowen had a bad premonition and immediately took out the space-time roulette, turned into a stream of light, and fled from the deck. Brother Lei, this time, I, Huang Wu, owe you a favor. After I capture this little bastard, I'll repay this favor. The instant Huang Wu's divine sense swept over Zhuowen, he flew out like a rock spreading its wings and directly chased after Zhuowen. His voice was like an empty valley that echoed on the deck of the Thunder God battleship. Lei Litian's expression was somewhat gloomy. This Huang Wu was truly sinister. He actually directly announced this to the public. Didn't that mean that he was the one who revealed Zhuowen's whereabouts? However, Lei Litian quickly regained his composure. He knew that Zhuowen was definitely going to die this time. He was no longer a threat to the Thunder God Garden, so he didn't take Huang Wu's words to heart. Zishuan, command the Thunder God battleship to the Pil Array Immortal Alliance. I'll go and watch the show. Lei Litian sent a message to Lei Zishuan before disappearing from the deck without a sound. Lei Zishuan's beautiful eyes were complicated as she looked at the distant stream of light chasing and fleeing. She knew that Zhuowen wouldn't be able to escape this time. Chapter 2797. Lei Litian makes a move. Zhuowen frantically activated the space-time roulette, causing its speed to reach its maximum. It was like a ray of light shuttling through the starry sky. However, Zhuowen's expression turned increasingly ugly. Although the space-time roulette speed had reached its maximum, he realized that Huang Wu's vast aura wasn't being pulled away by him at all. Furthermore, he realized that apart from Huang Wu's aura, there was another aura that surpassed Huang Wu's aura. This terrifying aura carried the aura of lightning. He knew that this aura that was even more terrifying than Huang Wu's was probably Lei Litian. When he thought of Lei Litian, Zhuowen's expression turned gloomy. He felt that it was too much of a coincidence that the Thunder God ship had encountered the Huangji family ship. He knew that there was definitely something fishy going on, and he guessed that the person behind all this was Lei Litian. Furthermore, he also guessed that Lei Litian's true motive might be to watch the fight from the other side. As for what his motive was, Zhuowen knew that Lei Litian must have guessed that he had secrets on him. Just based on guesses, he wanted to kill Zhuowen. It was clear that Lei Litian was vicious and wasn't a kind person. Although Huang Wu's speed was very fast, it was fortunate that Zhuowen's space-time roulette speed had reached a terrifying level ever since it was perfected, surpassing most of the flying divine artifacts. Huang Wu followed closely behind, but he wasn't able to close the distance between him and Zhuowen. He couldn't help but feel angry and shocked. He hadn't expected that Zhuowen would have such an extraordinary flying divine artifact. Even he couldn't catch up to him. As for Lei Litian, who was far behind, he was also quite shocked. In his opinion, although Zhuowen's cultivation had improved, he was still only at the level of Hunyuan Lord. After all, Huang Wu was an early-stage Genesis Lord, who knew how many times stronger than Zhuowen. Catching up to him would be an easy task. However, it seemed that he had underestimated Zhuowen. Lei Litian frowned when he saw that Huang Wu was still unable to catch up to Zhuowen. He originally wanted to watch the fight from the other side of the river. He wanted to see what kind of trump card Zhuowen had to be able to create havoc in the Huangji family and kill the Huangji family's third headmaster, Huang Lin, and a group of experts. Now that Huang Wu was still unable to catch up to Zhuowen, Lei Litian's plan was ruined. Could it be that this stalemate would continue? Thinking of this, Lei Litian laughed and said, "Little brother Zhua, why are you running? This time, you're representing my Thunder God Park to participate in the pill-tempering Grand Assembly. If you leave like this, aren't you not giving my Thunder God Park any face?" Zhuan's gaze was cold, and he didn't even look at Lei Litian behind him as he said coldly, "This, Zhuo would like to ask Villa Lord Lei. What is the meaning of this? Huang Wu and I already have quite a bit of enmity between us. Does Land Master Lei intend to just watch as I walk into the tiger's den? Now you want me to stop and die?" Lei Litian disagreed and said, "Pill Master Zhuo, you've misunderstood. No matter what the enmity between the two of you is, I will protect you. After all, you're a guest Pill Master of my Thunder God Park. You can be considered a member of my Thunder God Park. If you stop now, I'll speak for you." Huang Wu frowned and his eyes flickered, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he looked at Zhuan's back that was still fleeing. Zhuan sneered and said, "Villa Lord Lei, why don't you ask Huang Wu, this old bastard, to stop first? Instead, you want me, a mere Hunyuan lord, to stop first. Isn't this unreasonable?" Hearing Zhuan call him an old bastard, Huang Wu's eyes widened. His eyes contained intense anger, but he forcefully suppressed it. Once he caught this little bastard, he would torture him until he wished he was dead. The smile on Lei Litian's face faded, and he said indifferently, "Little brother Zhuo, I, Lei Litian, came to mediate with good intentions. Are you going to be so uncooperative? Do you not put me, Lei Litian, in your eyes?" Zhuo cursed Lei Litian for being shameless in his heart, but on the surface he said with a fake smile, "Villa Lord Lei, you're exaggerating." "I, Zhuo, didn't say that. It's just what you think." Lei Litian snorted and said, "Since you don't put me in your eyes, then don't blame me for being ruthless." With that, Lei Litian took a step forward and rushed out like a bolt of lightning. At Lei Litian's feet, a lightning sword had appeared at some point in time. As soon as the lightning sword appeared, its speed reached the extreme, instantly surpassing Huang Wu in front. Moreover, wherever the lightning sword passed, the starry sky exploded and lightning surged. It was as if the surroundings had turned into a world of lightning at this moment. Thunder God Sword. Huang Wu looked at the lightning sword at Lei Litian's feet, his eyes filled with fear. The Thunder God Sword was the most precious treasure of the Thunder God Park. It was forged by generations of Villa Lords and was a Genesis Divine artifact. One had to know that Genesis Divine artifacts were extremely rare in the Dao Palace level forces. Only the truly powerful Dao Palace level forces had Genesis Divine artifacts. The Huangji family was considered a relatively powerful Dao Palace level force, but they didn't have a Genesis Divine artifact. This was the specific reason why the Huangji family scale was similar to the Thunder God Park's, but their strength was slightly weaker. Of course, Lei Litian's cultivation was also slightly stronger than Huang Wu's. He was a mid-stage Genesis Lord. It was obvious that the Thunder God Park was stronger than the Huangji family. The Thunder God's sword exploded in the air. Its speed was extremely fast, surpassing Huang Wu's, and it instantly closed in on Zhuo. Zhuo felt the aura behind him getting stronger and stronger, and he knew that the shameless Lei Litian had finally made his move. Zhuo didn't even think about it. He used the power of the 4-star Pengu's sacred body and then used the tyrannical art of slaughtering Tao to punch out. This punch was extremely terrifying. It was as if it could split heaven and earth, and the entire space was distorted and suppressed because of it. Pucci! Unfortunately, the gap between Zhuo and the Thunder God's sword was too big. The moment the Thunder God's sword stabbed into Zhuo's right fist, it immediately disintegrated his right arm. Zhuo groaned and immediately retreated. Looking at his disintegrated right arm, his gaze was extremely serious. He knew that Lei Litian's attack just now didn't even count as an attack, but it easily disintegrated his right arm. One had to know that his Pengu's sacred body had smoothly reached the pinnacle of the 4-star Pengu sacred body by relying on the power of the dragon vein. Its power was even stronger than before. In front of Lei Litian's Thunder God sword, it was as weak as tofu. If he hadn't reacted quickly and retreated in time, his entire body would have been blasted into pieces. Lei Litian's attack immediately caused Zhuowen's speed to plummet. Huang Wu took the opportunity to land on the other side of Zhuowen. He stared at Zhuowen fiercely, and his powerful aura firmly locked onto Zhuowen, afraid that Zhuowen would escape. What a powerful physical body! Lei Litian looked at Zhuowen in astonishment. Although the sword just now was just a casual attack, it was still an attack from the Thunder God sword. This was a Genesis-level divine weapon. Even if it was just a casual attack, cultivators below the Genesis level would basically be smashed into pieces and die without a burial place. Chapter 2798. Scorching Sun Tyrannical Dao. Also, the Dao technique you used should be the tyrannical Dao slaughtering technique, right? From the looks of it, it doesn't seem to be an incomplete version. Could it be that you have obtained the complete version? It had to be said that Lei Litian's vision was extremely unique and ruthless. Zhuowen only used one move earlier, and he actually saw through the clues. Zhuowen remained silent. He was now completely surrounded by Lei Litian and Huang Wu. It would be difficult for him to escape. The only way now was to break out of the encirclement. Although Zhuowen's strength had improved rapidly, he knew that there was still a huge gap between him and the creator of the universe. If it was just one person, Zhuowen might have used the Ho-E godly arrow to fight. However, with two creators working together, Zhuowen knew that it would be useless even if he had the Ho-E godly bow and the Ho-E godly arrow. These two divine tools were indeed powerful, but he was too weak and couldn't unleash much of their power. Furthermore, it would be difficult for him to deal with one person, let alone two. Lei Litian, thank you for stopping this little bastard. Lei Litian, you should know that this kid has caused a ruckus in my Huangji family and killed several important people in my family. There is no need for Lei Litian to do anything. After I capture this kid, I will naturally reward Lei Litian. Huang Wu cupped his hands towards Lei Litian, a look of fear in his eyes. Although he said that he did not take the initiative to capture Zhuowen, even though Zhuowen's display of power had shocked him, he could tell that Zhuowen's power was still far inferior to that of a god of creation. Therefore, Huang Wu didn't think much of Zhuowen. As long as he made a move, Zhuowen wouldn't be a match for him. Right now, Huang Wu was mainly afraid of Lei Litian. When Lei Litian chased after him, Huang Wu faintly felt that something was wrong. He knew that Lei Litian wanted to thoroughly investigate Zhuowen. Thinking of this, Huang Wu knew that the arrest warrant he had issued was a mistake. That arrest warrant had already made Lei Litian suspect that this Zhuowen had something good on him. Right now, Lei Litian didn't know what Zhuowen had that made Huang Wu drool, so he didn't act rashly. If Lei Litian knew that this kid had the powerful Ho-E divine arrow, he wouldn't be so nice and would directly snatch it. Lei Litian, on the other hand, looked at Huang Wu with interest and laughed. This child is wanted by Brother Huang, so I naturally won't snatch his love. However, this child is extremely cunning. In order to prevent this child from escaping again, I will guard this place for Brother Huang. Otherwise, it won't be good if this child escapes again. After saying that, Lei Litian stepped on his Thunder God sword and landed not far away. He didn't make a move and just looked at Huang Wu and Zhuowen. Huang Wu's face turned ugly. He knew that Lei Litian was worried about him. Furthermore, what Huang Wu was most worried about was that when Zhuowen fought with him, he would directly take out the Ho-E divine arrow. Once the Ho-E divine arrow was exposed, no matter how shameless Lei Litian was, he would directly snatch it. Huang Wu knew that his cultivation was weaker than Lei Litian's, and he didn't have a Genesis-level artifact like Lei Litian. If Lei Litian made a move, he might not be a match for him. Let's end this quickly. After capturing this kid alive, we'll leave quickly. As long as we don't give this kid the chance to take out his blood-stained horn, that Lei Litian won't chase after us if he doesn't see that peerless monster. Huang Wu's mind was filled with thoughts. He immediately looked at Zhuowen and said, "Zhuowen, I won't make things difficult for you. As long as you obediently follow me back, I can promise to spare your life. Although you're strong, you still can't compete with me. This is your only way out." Zhuowen looked at Huang Wu indifferently and sneered, "Old fart, you're bullying the weak. You've already lost your face, haven't you? Now you're talking nonsense with me. Your words are bullshit to me. Do you think I'll believe you?" Huang Wu was furious, but he forcefully suppressed it. He said in a low voice, "I'm a man of my word." "If I can't keep my word," Huang Wu slowly opened his mouth. However, halfway through his sentence, he turned into a shadow and instantly appeared above Zhuowen's head. At some point, a huge blade half the length of a person had appeared in Huang Wu's right hand. The surface of the blade was covered in jewels and emitted a terrifying glow. The moment Huang Wu raised the blade, a golden radiance filled the sky, and a huge scorching sun rose on the back of the blade. Scorching heat instantly assaulted him. Heat waves rolled and scorched him. Eternal grade artifact, tyrannical scorching sun. Not far away, Lei Litian silently watched all of this with a calm gaze. He was looking forward to seeing how Zhuowen would deal with Huang Wu's sudden sneak attack. In Lei Litian's opinion, Huang Wu's desire to capture this kid alive was very likely because of something on this kid's body. Moreover, this thing was definitely important and should be this kid's trump card. After all, Huang Wu was a creator. He would definitely be able to force out this kid's trump card. When the time came, Lei Litian really wanted to see what Huang Wu was coveting. Zhuowen secretly cursed Huang Wu for being despicable. He actually attacked without saying anything. Although Zhuowen's reaction wasn't slow, he was already hit by the tyrannical scorching sunday. His left hand was directly melted into steam by the scorching heat. After Huang Wu's successful attack, the long blade in his hand was like a tidal wave that constantly slammed towards Zhuowen. He was pressuring Zhuowen, not giving him any chance to retaliate. Huang Wu had no other choice. He could only force Zhuowen like this. Otherwise, it would be terrible if this kid took out the Hou-Yi divine arrow. Lei Litian couldn't help but frown when he saw this scene. He saw through Huang Wu's intention. With Huang Wu's current offensive, he was afraid that he would soon kill Zhuowen. Moreover, Zhuowen was now in a completely passive position and didn't even have the chance to take out his trump card. "Old bastard Huang Wu, don't blame me for being unrighteous. Even if I die today, I'll drag you down with me. I know you're here for this thing. Today, I'll use this thing to kill you." Zhuowen shouted. There was a spirit ring hanging in front of his chest. At this moment, the spirit ring was emitting a faint light. Clearly, there was something that Zhuowen wanted to take out. Huang Wu's pupils shrank to the size of needles. He couldn't care less and used his strongest attack. Suddenly, 9 scorching suns swept over from 9 directions and bombarded Zhuowen. Zhuowen let out a muffled groan and was blasted into a bloody mist. The spirit ring in front of his chest was skillfully grabbed by Huang Wu. Huang Wu looked at the spirit ring in his hand and was wild with joy. He didn't even look at Zhuowen, who was blasted into a bloody mist. Chapter 2799. Huang Wu felt aggrieved. Huang Wu's mind was completely focused on the spirit ring he had just snatched. From Zhuowen's last words, he could tell that the powerful treasure was hidden in the spirit ring. He was certain that this supreme treasure was definitely a divine artifact that surpassed the Genesis level. It was much more powerful than the lightning god's sword in the lightning god's garden. Otherwise, Zhuowen wouldn't have been able to kill an eternal overlord despite being so many levels above him. Even his third brother, a half-step Genesis overlord, had been killed by this kid. However, Huang Wu was very cautious. After he obtained the spiritual ring, he immediately put it away and cupped his hands towards Lei Litian in the distance. "Lei Litian, I have already executed this child on the spot. This time, I thank Lei Litian for helping me check on him. I will repay this favor in the future. I will take my leave first. Lei Litian grinned. From Huangwu's expression just now, he knew that Zhuo Wen's spiritual ring was definitely hiding something extraordinary. Otherwise, Huang Wu wouldn't have lost his composure after obtaining the spirit ring. Brother Huang, I am very curious about Zhuo Wen's spirit ring. Why don't you let me take a look? Lei Litian smiled. Huang Wu's expression changed drastically. He slowly retreated and laughed dryly. Brother Lei, you must be joking. There's nothing good in this spirit ring. Zhuo Wen is just Chaos Origin Master. What do you think his spirit ring has that will catch your eye? I'm just casually taking it and planning to give it to my descendants. Lei Litian's smile grew even brighter. As far as I know, Brother Huang's descendants have all fallen. You still have descendants to give? Huang Wu fell silent. His expression was ugly. Brother Huang, don't play riddles with me. Zhuo Wen should have something good on him. Otherwise, you wouldn't be thinking about him so much. Good things should always be shared. What's wrong with letting me take a look at this kid's spirit ring? I won't steal it from you. Lei Litian said indifferently. Huang Wu cursed Lei Litian's shamelessness in his heart. He would never hand over Zhuo Wen's spirit ring. The blood-stained horn was very powerful. As long as he had it, Lei Litian might not be his match. Thinking of this, Huang Wu calmed down a lot. He was very confident in the power of the blood-stained horn. Even if Lei Litian forced him now, he had the horn. It was enough to completely suppress Lei Litian. Brother Lei, we have no enmity, and I don't want to fall out with you. Perhaps you don't know what I have spirit ring. If I take it out, you can only run. As Huang Wu spoke, his soul consciousness entered Zhuo Wen's spirit ring. In an instant, he violently broke the restriction on the surface of Zhuo Wen's spirit ring, allowing him to see the space inside. However, when Huang Wu saw the space in the spiritual ring, he froze. He was so angry that he started trembling. At this moment, Lei Litian was surprised by Huang Wu's words. He laughed and said, Huang Wu, your wings have hardened. I'm very curious about what it is that makes you so confident. You're so arrogant in front of me. At this moment, Huang Wu's mood was as if he had eaten yellow lotus. He couldn't explain his bitterness. He quickly took out Zhuo Wen's spirit ring and threw it to Lei Litian. He quickly said, Brother Lei, I was tricked. There's nothing in this spirit ring. Zhuo Wen lied to us. Lei Litian took the spirit ring. After confirming that there was indeed nothing in the spirit ring, he crushed the spirit ring and looked at Huang Wu indifferently. Huang Wu, do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? You kept this spirit ring. There's nothing in it, so it can only be kept by you. Zhuo Wen was killed by you. This is the only spirit ring on his body. You said that there's nothing in this spirit ring. Do you really think I'm an idiot? Hand over the spirit ring, and I can still forgive you. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Huang Wu's face was anxious. He already knew that he had been fooled, but Lei Litian would not believe his words. Who asked him to take the spirit ring and check it? Now he would not be able to clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River. His divine sense swept towards the place where Zhuo Wen had exploded into a bloody mist. When he found that Zhuo Wen's aura was indeed completely gone, his heart became even more gloomy. What? You're not going to hand it over? Lei Litian's voice was calm, but the killing intent on his body was becoming more and more terrifying, as if it would explode at any time. Brother Lei, I, Huang Wu, am willing to swear to the heavens that there's nothing in this spirit ring. I don't have to lie to you now, Huang Wu explained. Lei Litian did not let it go and said, in order to prove yourself, take down your spirit ring and let me check it. If I find any clues, don't blame me for not showing mercy. Huang Wu's face was very ugly. His spirit ring was filled with treasures that he had collected for many years. How could he casually let others check it? Furthermore, Huang Wu knew Lei Litian's temperament the best. If he were to hand over his spirit ring, it would probably be taken away by Lei Litian immediately. He would not foolishly hand over his spirit ring. Huang Wu, are you not going to hand it over? Since you're not going to hand it over, then don't blame me for being impolite. Lei Litian snorted coldly. Immediately, the surrounding air became incomparably cold. Lei Litian stomped his right foot, and the thunder god soared beneath his feet, descended like a bolt of lightning from the 9 heavens. With a so sound, it shot out towards Huang Wu. Huang Wu's face was ugly. He did not want to fight Lei Litian head-on. He immediately took out his flying divine tool and fled. You won't be able to escape. Lei Litian's voice, that was filled with killing intent, resounded in the surroundings. He turned into a bolt of lightning and instantly chased after Huang Wu. The instant Lei Litian and Huang Wu left this place, they did not notice that a very inconspicuous speck of dust had shot out against common sense and was chasing after Lei Litian and Huang Wu. On this speck of dust, there was a very inconspicuous Xiaohei dot. This Xiaohei dot was like a shadow, whether it was Lei Litian or Huang Wu. They did not expect that this Xiaohei dot was actually an incomparably vast spirit ring. Zhuowen sat upright in the spirit ring. His spirit ring controlled the spirit ring to move quickly, following behind Lei Litian and Huang Wu from afar. The instant he was blocked by Lei Litian and Huang Wu, he knew that there was no hope for him to break out. Therefore, he thought of the plan of substituting one person for another. He had previously hidden a large portion of his soul in the spirit ring, and the spirit ring had turned into a Xiaohei dot and hidden on a speck of dust not far away. The moment Zhuowen was killed by Huang Wu, a portion of Zhuowen's soul that was left in his body was also destroyed. Then he used this portion of his soul in the dust to be reborn. However, the price was very high. After all, a portion of his soul had been destroyed, causing Zhuowen to suffer serious injuries. Lei Litian and Huang Wu did not expect that Zhuowen, whose body and soul had been destroyed, would actually be able to be reborn. If they knew, they would not have been so careless as to fight amongst themselves. Instead, they would have carefully searched the scene where Zhuowen was killed. These two people are so shameless they almost killed me. If I don't pay a price, I, Zhuowen, will not be able to calm down. Chapter 2800. Terrifying killing in tent rumble. Terrifying thunderbolts exploded, and the sky was covered by thunderbolts, forming a boundless sea of thunderbolts. At the core of the sea of lightning, Lei Litian rode the thunder god's sword, flying at lightning speed with a mighty aura. On the other hand, Huang Wu was trapped in the sea of lightning. He kept waving the long blade in his hand, and 9 blazing suns protected his body, resisting the attacks of the sea of lightning. Master Lei, what is the meaning of this? Huang Wu kept waving the long blade in his hand, and rays of dazzling golden light soared into the sky, shattering the lightning energy. However, from Huang Wu's situation, it could be seen that he was barely able to resist the lightning energy. Lei Litian's eyes were cold as he looked at Huang Wu indifferently and said, "Brother Huang, I just want to check your miniature world. After all, you have obtained Zhuowen's item. I just want to take a look out of curiosity, but you have repeatedly refused. This Lei's patience is very limited." Huang Wu felt bitter in his heart. He knew that Lei Litian was not going to let him go, but he could not hand over his spiritual ring for Lei Litian to check. With Lei Litian's character, once he handed over his spiritual ring, he would never be able to get it back. Lei Litian, don't force me. You and I are both Genesis Realm Masters. If I really want to escape, you can't stop me. Huang Wu said coldly. However, Lei Litian laughed out loud and said, "Huang Wu, even if you can escape, I'm afraid you will have to pay a huge price. Why don't you hand over your spirit ring for me to check, and everyone will be harmonious? I, Lei Litian, guarantee that I will not touch the things in your spirit ring." Huang Wu sneered in his heart. He did not believe Lei Litian's words. "Huang Wu, I think you want to do this the hard way. Don't blame me for not giving you a chance. Lei Litian's eyes were gloomy. He took a step forward, and the thunder god's sword under his feet whistled as it flew towards Huang Wu. Wherever the thunder god's sword passed, lightning would explode. At this moment, it was as if lightning was everywhere in the world. Huang Wu's face changed. The long blade in his hand danced, and 9 blazing suns rose to resist the thunder god's sword. Bang, bang, bang. A series of explosions rang out as the lightning god's sword rapidly tore through the 9 blazing suns in front of it and arrived in front of Huang Wu. Clang! Huang Wu raised his long blade and slashed at the thunder god's sword. Suddenly, the golden light and the lightning intertwined with each other. The power was so strong that it was as if the entire world was about to collapse. An inconspicuous speck of dust was quietly attached to the surface of a rock in the distance. In the outside world, Zhuo Wen quietly set up a monitoring array formation on the surface of the meteorite and silently watched the battle between Huang Wu and Lei Litian. Because both of them were gods of creation, the battle between the two of them was extremely terrifying, so Zhuo Wen didn't dare to get too close. He only dared to watch from afar. Moreover, Zhuo Wen was also a little worried that if he got too close, the two of them might discover something unusual, so he only dared to watch from afar. The battle between Lei Litian and Huang Wu was undoubtedly extremely powerful and terrifying. However, Zhuo Wen could see that Lei Litian actually had the absolute advantage from this battle. Lei Litian's cultivation was higher than Huang Wu's, and the grade of the divine tool he used was also higher than Huang Wu's. There was no suspense in the battle between the two of them. After a few hundred rounds, Huang Wu's long blade was actually shattered by the thunder god's sword. The terrifying lightning sword passed through Huang Wu's right arm and destroyed it along with his shoulder. Ah, Lei Litian, just you wait. I, Huang Wu, will remember this enmity. Huang Wu screamed miserably. Soon after, his body turned fiery red as if he had spontaneously combusted. Boom! Huang Wu didn't even think and fled. His speed was extremely fast, and he instantly disappeared from Lei Litian's line of sight. Lei Litian frowned slightly as he watched Huang Wu disappear, but he didn't chase after him. Just now, Huang Wu had burned his blood essence, and his speed instantly increased by a few hundred times. Even if Lei Litian relied on the thunder god's sword, it would be difficult for him to catch up to Huang Wu's current speed. Unless Lei Litian also burned his blood essence. Lei Litian naturally wouldn't do that. The price of burning his blood essence was very high. After that, his strength would be greatly reduced, his injuries would be serious, and his cultivation might even drop. This kind of desperate move could only be used in a life and death situation. It was impossible for Lei Litian to use such a secret technique to chase after Huang Wu. Although Lei Litian was unwilling, he could only give up. Just as Lei Litian was about to leave, a terrifying killing intent suddenly enveloped his body, causing all the hairs on his body to stand on end. Who is it? Lei Litian suddenly shouted. He looked around and found that there was no one else around. He was surprised, but more than that, he was wary and vigilant. The killing intent became more and more terrifying, as if an incomparably vast mountain was crushing down on him. It was as if his body was being crushed. Cold sweat appeared on Lei Litian's forehead. His powerful divine sense began to search the surroundings, not letting go of even a speck of dust. Finally, he found something strange about a speck of dust on a meteorite thousands of miles away. He snorted coldly and took a step forward. His right hand formed a palm and slammed onto the meteorite. The terrifying lightning turned into a giant hand and slammed onto the meteorite, immediately shattering it into pieces. However, the moment the meteorite shattered, an inconspicuous black dot shot out and left the meteorite first. Lei Litian noticed the escaping black. His eyes were filled with killing intent. He stretched out his right hand and grabbed at the black dot. The black dot immediately threw out a punch. This punch was extremely huge, like a primitive planet. The wind was strong, and the stars were moving. Boom! However, this punch was easily smashed into pieces by Lei Litian's palm. However, it also gave the black dot a chance to breathe and successfully escaped the range of Lei Litian's attack. A figure flew out from the black dot. His long hair fluttered in the wind. In his hand, a blood-stained horn had appeared at some point in time. The strong killing intent was emitted from this blood-stained horn. Zhuowen, the moment Lei Litian saw the figure clearly, his eyes widened and revealed a look of disbelief. Wasn't Zhuowen killed by Huang Wu? Huang Wu had clearly seen Zhuowen's body and soul being destroyed. How could Zhuowen appear in front of him in perfect condition? You're not dead? Lei Litian's eyes were gloomy, but his attention was completely focused on the Hou-Yi divine arrow in Zhuowen's hand. He felt an unprecedented sense of danger from this Hou-Yi divine arrow. The killing intent on this Hou-Yi divine arrow made even him tremble in fear, as if a knife was hanging on his neck. Chapter 2801. Killing intent unleashed. Great! Since you're still alive, this thing belongs to me. Lei Litian's eyes were soon replaced by ecstasy. He stomped his right foot on the Thunder God's sword, and terrifying lightning spread out. He turned into a bolt of lightning and disappeared on the spot, whistling towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes were calm as he continued to stimulate the arrow. At the same time, he used the energy of the dragon vein in the outside world as the source, causing the killing intent of the arrow to reach an unprecedented level. Lei Litian frowned slightly. He could also sense the terrifying killing intent from Hou-Yi's arrow, and it was even affecting his movements. However, he was a mid-stage Lord of Creation after all, and he also had a Genesis-grade divine weapon like the Thunder God sword. Although the killing intent was terrifying, it wasn't enough to make him afraid. Zhuowen also felt Lei Litian's actions, and he knew that the killing intent of the arrow didn't affect him much. This was the first time Zhuowen had unleashed Hou-Yi's divine arrow, yet someone wasn't too affected by its killing intent. He knew that this was because the gap between him and Lei Litian was too big. Thinking of this, Zhuowen took a deep breath and took out an ordinary-looking wooden bow from the outside world. Then he placed the Hou-Yi divine arrow on the bowstring and slowly pulled it back. Puchi! Zhuowen only drew the bowstring slightly, but the killing intent of Hou-Yi's divine arrow instantly doubled. Zhuowen could feel the terrifying killing intent as if it were his own body, and he immediately suffered internal injuries. Moreover, the bowstring of the wooden bow was extremely heavy. Zhuowen only drew the bowstring a little, and he was already panting. One had to know that he cultivated the Pengu's sacred body, and even he found it so difficult to draw the bowstring. This showed how extraordinary the Hou-Yi divine bow was. Lei Litian also felt the doubled killing intent, and his eyes were filled with shock. But soon, the killing intent in his eyes became even more terrifying and sharp. He knew that the divine bow and divine arrow in the young man's hands were not ordinary items. Even his Thunder God sword could not unleash such terrifying killing intent. He knew that these were definitely treasures that were of a higher level than a Genesis divine artifact. He had to get this item, and now he couldn't wait to kill this kid and take this treasure. Zhuowen stood on the space-time wheel and quickly retreated, barely avoiding Lei Litian's lightning attacks. His right hand slowly wanted to draw the bowstring again. Zhuowen used all his strength. The veins on his arms bulged, and his face looked extremely ferocious. Finally, the bowstring was drawn a little more, and the killing intent of the Hou-Yi divine bow arrow at this moment, it was several times. That terrifying killing intent was, as if it was real, it sealed the surrounding space and formed a huge dragon. The dragon of the killing intent of the killing dragon, of the dragon of the world. Studio Lei Litian's attack. Lei Litian's face was slightly ugly. The killing intent that was erupting from the Hou-Yi divine arrow made even him feel uncomfortable and fearful. He had no doubt that if this arrow was shot out, even if he could block it, he would have to pay a huge price. I must kill this kid before this arrow is shot. Lei Litian's face was ferocious. With a leap, his speed increased by several times. The Thunder God's sword opened up a path in front of him, barely cutting through the terrifying killing intent of the dragon. He quickly closed the distance between him and Zhuowen. Open again. Zhuowen's eyes were bloodshot as he once again drew an arc. The veins on his arms all burst, and a bloody mist spread out, emitting a tragic smell. Boom! 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 At this moment, the killing intent increased by more than 10 times. The killing intent formed 10 huge killing intent of the dragon, which roared out and instantly surrounded Lei Litian in front of him. At this moment, Lei Litian's expression finally changed. Now that the Hou-Yi divine arrow had erupted with killing intent, he was truly terrified from the bottom of his heart. At this moment, the killing intent had increased by more than 10 times compared to before. It was simply too terrifying. Lei Litian looked at the rapidly retreating Zhuowen in front of him. He knew that if he wanted to get close to Zhuowen, he would need at least a few minutes. But now the killing intent of the Hou-Yi divine arrow in Zhuowen's hand had reached an extremely terrifying level, and it could explode at any time. Lei Litian had the intention to retreat. Retreat! Lei Litian did not even think as he immediately urged the Thunder God's sword to retreat. He did not dare to take this arrowhead on from Zhuowen. He knew that if he did, he would definitely be seriously injured, and there was a risk of death. Moreover, he also noticed that Zhuowen had paid a huge price to shoot this arrow. As long as he dodged this arrow, this kid would not be a problem. At that time, he would kill this kid and then obtain this powerful monster. When Zhuowen saw that Lei Litian did not advance and instead retreated, he knew that Lei Litian was beginning to feel fear. Zhuowen's eyes were incomparably red. He completely ignored his hands and forcefully pulled the bowstring once again. At this moment, Zhuowen had pulled the bowstring to a third of the arc. The killing intent of the Hou-Yi divine arrow had risen to an extremely terrifying level. Whoosh! At this moment, Zhuowen had also reached his limit. Even though he had the Pangus sacred body, he could not withstand the terrifying pulling force of the Hou-Yi divine bow. The moment he released the bowstring, his hands exploded into 2 clouds of blood mist. Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was pale and bloodless. His entire body almost collapsed because he could not withstand the terrifying killing intent. Fortunately, his self-healing ability was extremely strong. While he was collapsing, he was also constantly recovering. As a result, Zhuowen's body went back and forth between collapse and recovery. In the end, he barely managed to prevent his body from completely collapsing. The blood arrow flew across the sky. The killing intent seemed to break through the sky and firmly locked onto Lei Litian, who was constantly retreating. Lei Litian also felt the blood arrow flying towards him, as well as the terrifying killing intent that accompanied it. His heart was completely filled with fear. At this moment, the killing intent that the blood arrow carried was something that even he could not withstand. However, the blood arrow had firmly locked onto him. Moreover, its speed was too fast. Even if he wanted to escape, it would be difficult. Lightning seal! Lei Litian roared. The Thunder God, sword in his hand, suddenly blasted out. Terrifying lightning filled the sky. Then these lightning bolts condensed into an indestructible lightning prison, wanting to trap the blood arrow that was flying across the sky. Unfortunately, the lightning seal could only block the blood arrow for a breath of time before it was penetrated by the blood arrow and dissipated into countless electric sparks. Lei Litian kept retreating. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. He stared at the blood arrow that was flying towards him. In an instant, the Thunder God's sword in his hand slashed out hundreds and thousands of swords. The dense sword light was like an incomparably thick sword wall that blocked the blood arrow. Boom! However, what Lei Litian did not expect was that the wall formed by the sword light could not block for even a breath of time and was pierced by the blood arrow. Lei Litian roared. He knew that continuing to retreat was not a solution. He took a step forward and clenched the Thunder God's sword in his hand tightly. The moment the Thunder God's sword collided with the blood arrow, an invisible wave of air spread out. The surrounding tens of billions of kilometers of space seemed to tremble. Kacha! The Thunder God's sword actually shattered into countless pieces. Lei Litian frantically burned his blood essence to prevent the Thunder God's sword from completely shattering.